attendees, my colleagues from the Ministry of Public Infrastructure and other public servants, a very pleasant good afternoon to you. My name is Rabindranath Chandapal, and I'm the Manager of Technical Services at the Ministry of Public Infrastructure. At many of our events over the years, there's always been something you could count on at any such event, and that is looking around the room. And in one corner, you'd always notice a very distinctive ponytail and an orange road safety vest, always worn, no matter where he was, by Mr. Walter Willis. At this moment, could you please join with us at the Ministry of Public Infrastructure in paying a minute of silence to our colleague. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Willis, for your sterling contribution to this country you love so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning we had a very interesting session. And for those of us who were able to not be distracted by Facebook or Candy Crush on our telephones, we would have benefited tremendously from great knowledge and insight in those presentations so ably carried out by our speakers this morning. I know many of you had lots of questions, and it was quite a popular view at lunch that we cut the time too short for the questions, but as you could understand, there's only so much that we could contain. But my colleagues have agreed this afternoon to keep their presentations at a minimum, maybe speed up just a little bit so we could entertain even more questions, as we were quite taken aback by how many questions there were. There were so many that we tried to write down during the lunch break, and we tried to address as many of those as we can in the presentations themselves. But we'd like to leave you with ample opportunity to ask what you'd like this afternoon. I just want to share with you a little experience I've had. I joined the Ministry of Public Infrastructure almost 11 years ago. And when I first came on board, I was at the lowest rung of the engineering ladder. It's a position we titled Office Engineer. And that position basically meant that anything any of the senior engineers wanted you to do, you had to do. And almost exclusively, I found myself doing a lot of procurement work. And there was a reason for that. As important as procurement is, my colleague Philip, who's our procurement officer, is going to be very upset. It's extremely boring. Extremely, extremely boring. And there's a reason for that. It's very important, and it requires thorough work, great understanding, and a lot of dedication to what you do. And I think Minister Patterson and Minister Ferguson and Minister Sharma all pointed out that, that there are complaints, there are problems, but it's a system that necessarily requires improvement. And the only way that you can continuously improve is to have feedback. And that is why a session such as this is so ridiculously important. We come for the day. Yes, it may drag on, but it's very important that you're here, because your voice is not going to be disregarded anytime in the future. But as you have the audience now, as you have so many of the policymakers and those who play a very important part in this procurement process here, I think it's really in your best interest to exploit that opportunity and to ask the questions that you want to ask. Don't be afraid to ask, but please, I beg you, I've been guilty of this myself. Sometimes when you think you have a question, it's always good to write it down. It almost never sounds the same way when you say it to when you first thought of it in your head. So we're going to be having presentations. Jot down your comments, jot down your questions, and then we'll have a session where you can ask those. So just jumping straight into business, we had Mr. Philip Bryan scheduled this morning, but we made an adjustment to bring him this afternoon, and we're going to start with him. So Philip Bryan is the procurement manager at the Ministry of Public Infrastructure. He's been doing that quite some time officially, and even long before that, he's always been involved in most of our procurement business at the ministry. Philip is an architect, a certified project manager, and now a procurement specialist. And I'd like to invite him now to present on the pre-qualification process. Philip?
Minister Sharma, in his remarks this morning, spoke about the size of the budget that is spent through the process of procurement, etc. What is heartening or disturbing many times is that we are growing all the time in terms of how much money we spend, the number of projects we do. We are also growing in numbers of contractors and suppliers who will come to this line to provide a product or a service or some goods. What is also growing is the number of persons who do not understand the process and the number of persons who do not think that one of the basic things for them to do is to read the instrument that would give them the leverage of understanding and give them the leverage of execution. That is the Procurement Act. I think Minister Sharma, again, alluded to that fact. I would like to encourage each and every one of us to read the Procurement Act. Many of my colleagues would come to me with questions and say, what do we do in this and that? And I would just go to the corner of my office and I will pull the Procurement Act and I will say, it's right there. Read the document. This afternoon, I will attempt to present to you what many contractors come to my office and ask, how I'm getting the system by. So this presentation or this seminar is for new entrants, new persons coming into the system. I'm hoping that I can just share some insight. They're going to be brief. Please ask questions. Please ask questions. On the heels of the presentation made by the Honorable Bertley Wickham, Chair of the Board, I'm not ready yet. Thank you. Thank you, my able. On the heels of his presentation, Mr. Bertley Wickham basically covered everything. He's usually a very thorough man, so I will be reiterating some of the points he made and trying to maybe just emphasize on some of the points. What is pre-qualification? And why is it necessary? Pre-qualification is the process of screening of potential contractors or suppliers on the basis of factors such as experience, financial capabilities, managerial abilities, reputation, etc., to develop a list of qualified bidders who will receive an invitation to bid. In other words, we will be screening those persons who want to express an interest to get into the system. And we will be giving feedback to say that you're eligible, you're not eligible, these are the reasons why you are and why you're not. We're hoping that you pay attention to this, and this is because we are now trying to prepare you for the event of pre-qualification a little later this year. And we are hoping that many of you guys will be pre-qualified and we will start to enjoy a more competitive system with our bids later on this year and next year. I would like to bring away some key points from the Procurement Act with regards to pre-qualification. Pre-qualification is done at an agency level or ministry level, and it is guided by the regulations which is attached to the Act, the Procurement Act. Pre-qualification is designed by every agency a little differently. The process is the same, but the requirements are different. And this is because each agency may categorize their needs and require suppliers to meet and satisfy the specifications to meet those needs. At the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, we have about 9 categories for pre-qualification. It ranges from labor-only contract to providing surveying services to equipment rental, fixing of roads and bridges, and so forth. Mr. Berkeley Wickham also pointed out that with pre-qualification and with invitation for bids, the government of Guyana has to recognize international obligations. What this means is that you may find that a pre-qualification coming out of the ministry has a certain specification and it is packaged in a certain way. And this is for works or goods required by our ministry that will be funded by local funds. For goods and services and works that we will be buying or you will be supplying that will be paid for or funded by international, bilateral, we may have loan agreements from IDB, World Bank, CDB, and so on. We're having Chinese grants, Japanese grants, and so on. They may come with their own constraints with regards to what pre-qualification looks like and how we should process bidders. It is very important for me to say this at the outset so as to avoid the confusion later on. However, for the sake of this presentation, I will not necessarily be going into the requirements to satisfy these obligations. We're really focusing on the new entrants to the ministry to spend local funds. As I said, these loan agreements and grants may have may put a little more burden on how to qualify. These may include restrictions or more elaborate assessments for specific projects. When there's an apparent conflict between the requirements of the loan agreement with these agencies, IDB, etc., when there's an apparent conflict between that and what our Procurement Act says, there's a higher level agreement which says that these agreements or these regulations will supersede what is stated more or less in our Procurement Act or in our policy or in how we do things. Please take a note of that. I have encouraged you from the outset to become intimate with the Procurement Act. You need to understand that when we're spending donor funds, there might be some adjustments. Qualification of suppliers. I'm trying to pin all of this to the Procurement Act. There's a section in the Procurement Act, Part 2, that deals with pre-qualification. So I'm just going to go through that briefly, and then I'm going to jump right into the actual process and the proceedings. Qualifications of suppliers. Every supplier or contractor wanting to participate in procurement proceedings must qualify by entering such following criteria. Now, must qualify means that from time to time, we may, through the pre-qualification process or by open bid, invite contractors to submit their proposals or their bids. So pre-qualification means that you are pre-qualified. And at the time of making your offer or your bid, and the elaborate process of qualifying the contractor will not be done then. So we find that pre-qualification helps with the general program of the ministry, whether it's per year and as we move forward. In other words, pre-qualification allows the ministry to have a market research. It is a market research technique. And it feeds the ministry with the understanding of maybe how we could modify our invitation to treat maybe we can adjust the tranches by which we invite bids, rather than having everything in January based on the pre-qualification list that we are able to construct at the start of the year. We would know maybe we need to tailor something differently, maybe we need to do a phasal implementation of our whole budget, and so on. So it is a market research, and it pre-qualifies you, and it informs us. There's post-qualification also that goes on every time we have a substantial bid. It comes in, and then we basically qualify you again. Because many times, what obtains at the start of the year may change. Bankruptcy, your staff would have left, may have lost an equipment or two, so that later down in the year, we may have to qualify you, and this is a post-qualification. We invite you to a large job, and because the risk will be higher, then we qualify you in that bidding document. Let me just go this over again. I don't want us to get confused with this. Pre-qualification allows you to get into the system. We are able to look to you as being pre-qualified. And we say, I know that in Essequibo, I can call on these 5 contractors to react to an emergency work or these few pieces of work or the supply with short notice, so that we can send that out to guys who are pre-qualified without having to do a massive, elaborate screening. That is pre-qualification and its benefit to us. Post-qualification is when we invite you to submit your bids at the National Tender Board, and it is more specific to the project. The project may require 2 engineers, maybe excavators and some special equipment, some special experience. So that is a post-qualification. When you submit your bid, we look at what you would have submitted, and then we qualify you. I don't want to go into too much detail there because my other colleagues will be making presentations on the simulation of the bid submissions. Qualification of suppliers. When we're qualifying a supplier, these are just some of the areas we examine to ensure that they are able to be entered onto the list. Administrative capacity, technical, financial, and legal capacity. The administrative, I think we should basically have a good idea of what that is. Mr. Berkeley Wickham elaborated on that this morning. Technical capacity speaks to your previous experience and your capabilities and so on. Now, I know there's this old adage, I need a job, but I need experience. But how do I get experience if I don't get a job? So now I'm saying that for pre-qualification, we will be looking at your technical capacity. Now, while experience is usually part of that for the new entrants, we will examine carefully what you have proposed to be part of who you are. This examination will yield to us a capability. Let me just try to give you an example. If I have 2 architects coming for a job, one architect says, I used to work with my father, I used to do these various things, or I have read this, or my major project dealt with these various things. And the other architect says, oh, I was very bright in school, I got distinction, and so on. Those 2 architects have 2 different capacities. None of them had an official job, but when they are, as new entrants, present who they are and what compile who they are, when we examine that, we're able to establish one guy has the capability over the other guy or girl, as you know, many female architects. So for the new entrants, we will still be examining the administrative capacity, the technical capacity, the financial capacity, etc. What I find with the financial capacity for new entrants is that if you can write a good business plan, a good business proposal, or you can maybe get some help to do that, you can approach the bank, you can approach some hardware stores and so on, and these guys will examine your plan. They will examine how you plan to do business. And they will be in a position to offer you maybe a line of credit and so on. And we want to see that you have this capacity. Minister Patterson mentioned this morning that you may be accustomed working in the private industry, and you can call the guy and say, I run out of cement and so on, I got to pay them on it tomorrow. And the client will say, okay, come tomorrow morning for the money, or come Saturday, and so on. It doesn't work that way with the ministry. We have layers of accountability and checks and balances, and that induce some amount of time to process requests and so on. What financial capacity at the point of pre-qualification allows is for us to shortlist you or select you to say, I can work with this guy because he has access to line of credit, so that when I hire him to do a job, the job will not suffer because I'm not able to pay him immediately upon his request. And I really believe that's the essence of why we look at these capacities to examine and to decide who is shortlisted and who is not. And then there's the legal capacity. If you're insolvent, if you have pending or previous litigation that may bar you from participating in bids, or we may want to take with a pinch of salt in order to put you on the list. These are some considerations we make. A point to note with all of the capacities, however, that we will be examining is that if you misrepresent, I know some people don't lie, but they might misrepresent how they present or what they present to us, and we are able to establish that it's not exactly what obtains. The Procurement Act, I think it's pretty clear with the punitive measures that can be meted out, and certainly you will be off of the list. And to regain entry, the proceedings of pre-qualification of suppliers. Suppliers is not limited to goods only. I'm using the term contractors and suppliers interchangeably to mean people providing a product toward us, whether it's goods or works. Proceedings are as follows. Solicitation of pre-qualification. This essentially means we will put an advertisement in the papers to say we are doing pre-qualification, and this is what you'll see pretty soon, in a matter of months. What we will do, we will take the comments and we will do a debrief of this conference, and we will modify our way forward so that it is more effective and it addresses your concern as we evolve. When you respond to the solicitation for pre-qualification or the invitation to pre-qualify, we issue a pre-qualification document or an application document. You fill that document, paying attention to the capacities that I mentioned earlier, which will be outlined in the document, and ensure that you satisfy those. We entertain queries. So during the process of filling the document and so on, if you have a query and you need clarification and so on, you can engage us. The best way to do so is in writing. I believe we are moving toward encouraging or accepting email queries so that we can accept those queries and not have you come into the office or use parchment to send a query, and we will disseminate that to everyone. If it's a substantial query that we need to address, then we distribute or broadcast the response to that query to everyone who have purchased the pre-qualification document and those who will also be picking that up. The criteria for the shortlist is also captured in the document, and I'm trying to rush through here. According to the Procurement Act, the procurement entity shall make a decision with respect to the qualification of each supplier or contractor submitting an application for pre-qualification. In reaching that decision, the procurement entity shall apply only the criteria set forth in the pre-qualification document. Mr. Berkeley-Wickham made a point, he stressed on the fact that evaluators are constrained to the evaluation criteria for bidding. The Procurement Act deals with the process or the evaluation of pre-qualification pretty much the same way it deals with the process of evaluation for a bid. Similar. There's some distinction, but quite similar. So when we prepare this document, we're trying to capture your comments here, prepare the, modify the document, prepare it, get it to you, and we are constrained to use only what we have asked for and how you have satisfied those in order to say you're qualified, you're on the list, and go forward. Evaluation of pre-qualified applications, that one is a little emphasized because I want to stress on that in subsequent slides. And the notification of shortlist. We were a little delinquent lately with doing this. We're committed to making this change. This is when we would have compiled a shortlist. We would either notify each person on the shortlist that they have been shortlisted, and each person who have not been shortlisted that they have not been shortlisted. After that, we can entertain concerns or questions about why they were not able to meet that shortlist. As you become intimate with the Procurement Act, you'll be able to understand what your rights are in this process. Generally, there are two types of pre-qualification. I mentioned it earlier that there's a pre-qualification, which we intend to do closer to the end of this year. And then there's a post-qualification, which is a pre-qualification, which is a post-qualification when you submit the bid. But at various agencies, such as the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, we do this general pre-qualification, which is cyclic. It's usually a year. And then there's a specific pre-qualification. So let's say the government of Guyana wants to build a hydropower plant or a small hydropower plant. We can do a specific or projectized pre-qualification where we invite the market to pre-qualify for this specific project, putting or detailing in that pre-qualification application requirements which are quite different to the general pre-qualification. It deals with administrative capacity. It takes a look at the applicant's ability to organize, coordinate, and present such capacity for evaluation for the specific project. The technical capacity deals with the resources, the staff, experience, and so on, but this is specific for the project. The financial capacity, as said earlier, deals with access to line of credit, income and expenditure statement for most businesses, and audited financial statement if you're incorporated. Presentation, and we assess your liquidity if you're insolvent or otherwise. Legal capacity, again, deals with if you're incorporated, sole trader, nationality of main members, and if you have any legal issues in the court, pending litigation, etc. There's always a question, why pre-qualify? Why pre-qualify, and I hear this a lot from contractors, why pre-qualify if all year I don't get called for a job? Well, pre-qualify because you might be called for a job. I don't know if you have had the experience of going to your mailbox and seeing an envelope from, I think it's mostly Scotiabank, that says you have been pre-approved for a credit card or for a loan. In this sense, pre-approval is similar to pre-qualification. And if later on you need a loan, you do not have to have a post-qualification in order to get that loan, so that you understand your odds. Now, that is the bank. When you pre-qualify with us, you stand a better chance to respond to works of a certain size, of a certain complexity, and so on. Question: how does pre-qualification allow for new entrants after shortlist is created? We create the shortlist. We have work in various districts, various size, various complexity. That's how the shortlist is created. So we have a shortlist for folks in the electrical field, and then we categorize it according to maybe air conditioning and line maintenance and so on. When the ministry has a job that does not meet the requirements to go to National Tender Board, we will be looking toward this list, and in a random manner, in a proper random manner, we will be going through that list to select folks and inviting them to provide bids. And again, this process is usually swift because it does not require the post-qualification. How does pre-qualification allow for open competition? The use of the pre-qualification list activates the restrictive tendering process, and that in itself is a competitive process. It is very distinct from sole sourcing, because what we do is we invite, and your offer, both technical and financial, allows us to make an informed decision of who to select. So open here means that it is in the public domain. We write you and we keep the files, we keep these things on record, which is what the Procurement Act requires of us. And another response to the question of why pre-qualify, again, is so that we will have our finger on the pulse of what the market is doing, is saying, and the health of the market. It is a market research for us. So that if we want to redo Sheriff Street or Regent Street, and we do not know what the market has, or if we have local contractors that can do that, then we will go through a progressively elaborated, elongated process without understanding who will be providing this. So we want to redo Regent Street. We would have had our pre-qualification list, and we know that contractors have a certain size, certain experience, certain background, certain financial and otherwise capability. And we know now that we can look toward the local market, we can go shortlist, or we have to go to an international bid, and so on. So the pre-qualification process and its resulting list helps us with the market research and helps the people of Guyana to benefit from the process and how the government does their business. All right. Typically, the pre-qualification request form, we have the categories of pre-qualification, as I mentioned, from electrical to rental of equipment to labor only, and so on. There's an invitation to treat, public advertisement, mentioned earlier. There's a closing date time. There's a place for submission. And I mentioned earlier also that a lot of the requirements for the process or the proceedings of pre-qualification resembles that of bidding for a job. The pre-qualification application form also specifies how your response and submission must be packaged. Submission requirement details. In other words, this is how you respond: the application, legal trading name, contact information. Many folks will say, Tom Jones, they don't put address, no contact, or anything. If we have to, if we require query or clarification, in fact, we have no way of contacting you. Sometimes there isn't a business registration and so on. And we have had a lot of, oh boy, I want to say trash, because the submissions, I mean, at a quick glance, it's, just suited for the bin. But we can't do that, because we try to treat the applicants with some amount of respect, but we are asking that the applicants treat us with some amount of respect. We are progressively modifying our documents to capture what you're saying. So we are having this conference because we are interested in opening the doors to you, so that we can evolve as a country, we can evolve in this procurement process. But you cannot, if you're going for a US visa and they ask for your name, your date of birth, and so on, you don't ignore those things. We are creating a public infrastructure visa for you. Please respond properly to our application. Have some supporting documents to authenticate some of your claims. We dealt with the NIS, the GRA, the TIN, and so forth. A point on the NIS, GRA, and so on. Because it's pre-qualification, we have a little caveat in the document that says, we need your recent NIS compliance certificate, recent GRA. Recent, and it would be described there, means maybe in the past 6 months. And this is because after the process of pre-qualification, the invitation for an actual job where the obligations to satisfy your social responsibility, NIS, GRA, TIN, and so on, it will then be assessed. It will then be considered. So we do not put you under the stress at the close of the year to have all of these things valid. You can have it valid, but we will also accept recent ones that are no more than 6 years old. 6 months. 6 months, sorry. 6 months. I got to say that again. 6 months. Expiration. When you're offering the description of your previous experience, kindly do not be shy to state the complexity and the size and to whom you would have supplied your products, whether it's works or goods, so that we can have a thorough view of whatever little experience you may have had. And if you have been in the marketplace a little while, we want to be able to capture that and maybe categorize how we place you on the list. If you say, I built a hut, okay, cardboard hut, wooden hut, concrete hut, where, how much, for whom, when. We need to understand that complexity. We cannot now create a form and give you blank spaces to fill, because that form will be never ending because of, the variety of complexity of works and goods and services that are offered. Therefore, it is in your interest to offer us brief, not too elongated, description of the complexity of previous projects or supplies. The capacity of your resources. If you say, I have multiple excavators, multiple trucks, we don't know what that means. If you say you have 2 trucks, we need to know the age of the truck, the capacity of the truck, and so on. So we can, again, sensibly accept, process, and decide to accept you on the list, where to put you on the list, so that if we have a job of a certain size, we would know, which part of this list we need to go in order to invite for a restrictive bid. If you have 2 engineers, what does that mean? You have 2 engineer friends? What does it mean? You need to say if it's permanent staff, temporary staff, and so on. Your equipment, if it's scheduled, give a schedule of the equipment. If it's owned, if it's leased. Seriously, you can't say I have 2 trucks on lease and I would accept you. You say, I have 2 trucks, they're on lease, and here is the lease form, or here is the authentication of that, and we would accept you. These things are pretty important. I really, this cannot be overstated. And I'm hoping that when we go toward the pre-qualification process, we will have a pre-submission conference again to go through the document to help you understand what the document is saying, what is requiring, and maybe even give you a sample of what the submission of that document should look like from your side. Financials, let me rush through. Income expenditure statement, business, audited financial for incorporated businesses, access to line of credit, and your legal capacity again. What just happened there? I alluded to the fact that we have been burdened with deciphering submissions made by applicants. Among the crystal ball occasions for arriving at this list are, documents that are incomplete. Mr. Berkeley said that you did everything right, you have the staff, the equipment and all that, but you failed to sign the bid form. I mean, please. So it must be complete or completed. What we have done with our bidding documents, we have, I think in the front page or close to the front page, we have a checklist. Yeah. So when you're about to close off your bidding document, you go back to that checklist and ensure that you can check everything on that list as being done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. At this point, if you have any questions regarding pre-qualification, I'd like to invite you to ask those questions now.
My name is Adrian Austin. My company name Awaka Engineering and Construction. From this morning and this afternoon session, what I've learned is what I have already read from some of the tender forms. But my difficulty was filling out the form, understanding the rates as it relates to the metric and I had a consultant friend who actually taught me how to do it. But some of the things in the document, especially as it relates to the finances, right, I had some difficulty there. So I decided not to send through my document because I did not understand that process, because there wasn't anyone that I actually felt wanted me to learn about this process. So this afternoon I got the opportunity to understand from the presentation about the pre-qualification, because I was speaking to my friend here and I told him that I understand the term line of credit, because in doing my normal work and so, I would normally go to some of my store friends in Barbies and I can get credits based on materials and so. As recent as yesterday, right? Now, one of the things about the process that I've learned here, that what I wanted to see in the presentation is some of the documents. The documents was missing because I think some of the other newcomers, they would have also learned what some of the documents actually look like, rather than just going through the normal writing. And I think I would like to make a recommendation, at least 2 recommendations. To say the new contractors, we can use like pictures of of projects, right? So rather than going and searching around and having some doubt, these forest comers now can actually take out pictures and attach it to those documents, so that would also clarify if there is any doubt to the evaluators. My next recommendation will be if we can use a follow-up workshop. And rather than coming to a conference like this is very good. But if we have workshops, the workshop will help some of the younger ones to actually understand how to fill out the form, because that was my difficulty, and I would love to engage in a process like that so that I won't have to go to other persons who would just want to show me a top, but rather than to have a more in-depth knowledge of what I'm actually looking for.
In my presentation, I know you guys just ate, so you might not have been, you know, I had a little difficulty focusing myself. But in the presentation, I mentioned one that what we're hoping to have, and thank you for your comments and suggestions. We're taking notes on that. I mentioned that what we will do to further encourage this process of encouraging new entrants is to, at the time of pre-qualification, when we would have issued those forms or invite them through the solicitation method by the press and so on, before the submission, we will invite contractors to attend a pre-submission conference. At that conference, we will hear and clarify your queries. We will also present a simulated document of what a submission should look like. You mentioned that you had some difficulties submitting or filling the forms and so on. We will address this at that time a little later on. The decision to accept photographs and so on as proof or description of complexity of projects that you have in the past is a decision that will have to be taken a little later. It's a little above my pay grade. But what I would suggest is that I can see from the onset we may have a challenge with verifying that, in fact, you know, it's your work. I can go on Facebook too, you know. So, like I said, I'm sure that this can be accepted with some other attachments and so on. But I wouldn't decide now whether or not. It's a good suggestion. We will take it, and we will give a feedback on how this will be accepted.
My question is, we have so many little and big contracting companies. In the procurement system, is there a facility made for persons? Let's say, for instance, we have a national project, and we have some contractors who qualify. Is there a process whereby, instead of awarding this contract to one contracting company, is there a process where they can have a collaboration of these various skilled persons in which the national project can be done fragmentedly, whereby one company can have one set of phase one, another set can have phase two, and so we have a collaboration of various companies. So as the minister was mentioning earlier, they have an equilibrium of finances. Instead of just awarding one share of the pie to everybody, we have it fragmented, and so everybody can, get a chance to benefit from our country's resources and the procurement process. Is there any facility that, or will there be any facility put in place? If there is none, will there be any facility like that?
What comes to mind immediately are two things. I think only one is relevant to your question. In our bidding documents, what we're trying to do a lot more in recognition of the variety of speciality of contractors that is emerging right now. Electricians, we have plumbers, and so on, and people are trying to stay in their field, and reacting to that, or in recognition to that. And to answer your question, what we're doing is we have started to do is have nominated subcontractors in the document. Either nominated, meaning that under a prime cost section of the document, we would have ironmongery, nominated subcontractor, plumber, nominated subcontractor. So from the start of the job, we are engaging general contractors, but at the start of the job, the general contractor understands that there are these sections of the job or these skill sets of the job that will have to go to a nominated subcontractor. Now let me just elaborate. So if Tom Jones or Robin Chandrapal's construction company is a general contracting company, and he has expert plumbers, but it says plumbing goes to nominated subcontractor. What happens then is that during the process of the execution and the management of that project, we recognize by way of his qualifications and so on that he can do the job, or we allow that section of the job to go through a process of bidding, and then we move forward. The other thing that comes to mind, I hope Minister won't be upset. The other thing that comes to mind, in architecture, some of these big elaborate churches in France and Europe and so on, they would take 40 years to build, 60 years to build, and so on. And you can easily walk along the walls of these churches or these buildings, and you can tell when the architect died. Because there's a distinctive mark of the workmanship, of the quality of material, and so on. So generally, when you would have assessed a contractor or you have screened the process toward awarding the contract, you want to continue with that screening process. You want to continue with what would have resulted from that. Because I understand what your request is, it has merit. But when you try to fragment it, it puts a burden on our management. It puts a burden on who to blame, and so on. We have what we call the effects liability period. You install the building, and it's good, it's finished. But then there's a leak. Was it the man who plastered the pipe that damaged the pipe, or the man who put the pipe in that did the poor job? So we have to carefully and delicately consider how we are entertaining the emerging speciality of contractors that we have.
I am Samuel Smith, a representative of Smith's Construction Enterprise. I would like to ask one simple question with regards to the labor-only contract. Is there a ceiling or a limitation in terms of prices and so forth?
No, except it goes up to $14 million. In other words, we essentially will be soliciting labor-only contracts from contractors who will provide certain special skills for works or operations that meet a certain ceiling under us, and that is $14 million. I find that once a job goes beyond the agency level, the threshold level, it starts to go into the realm of complexity that requires a more all-in sort of thing. So I would like to say, there's a ceiling, 14 million, but I'm sure that there might be a circumstance beyond that. But generally, the general rule is up to about $14 million.
My name is Christopher King from King's Construction. It's a question to the pre-qualification. I already made mention that some people asked you want to get into the system. It was stating how to pre-qualify. My question is simple. If someone didn't have the opportunity to apply for pre-qualification and they see a tender in this the tender for a project, and the tender is competitive and responsive, would that person be considered?
Yes. When there's an invitation to treat in the newspaper or an invitation for bid, and it says that this procurement process will be conducted through the national competitive process, that is what it means. It will be an open process, and it will be subject to the post-qualification, meaning that when you submit your document, you'll be qualified then. Those who can apply for those jobs also include the persons who will have been pre-qualified. I try to elaborate on the fact that there's a projectized qualification, meaning now we want to overlay Chandrapal Street, and we require X, Y, and Z. So when you submit your bid, we do a post-qualification, meaning post to the invitation, after you submit, and we evaluate your ability to perform that task. And if you meet it and you're lowest and so on, then you will be selected. So if you have been pre-qualified already, you may apply. And if you have not been pre-qualified, you may apply for jobs that you see in the newspapers.
My name is Mark Henry, representing Henry's Contract and Maintenance Service. Mr. Terrence, if you were on a part of the qualification list as partner with someone,
right,
and subsequently, for some strange reason, the company split.
Right.
You have someone now going individually.
Right.
Would they able to add, because in the pre-qualification list we'll have the particulars, who you did work for and everything. Would you able to add that to the new qualification list, saying that we did work for this person under this name before, or something like that? Could you outline that from us?
That sounds like a double half permutation equation. Just repeat it slowly for me. I didn't get it, sorry. Because you're saying that you were in partnership and you were qualified thus.
But before, yeah.
Right, and then you go later on and there was a split.
Correct.
Right.
So
what
you
you
had a new register, you registered a new business.
Right, right.
So on the qualification form which will be coming up,
Right.
would you be able to add
Yes.
the
Yes.
particulars that
Yes.
you did work with the ministry
Yes.
under this name before?
Yes,
Would that
yes.
be, could you use that?
Yes. The question that is searching is if both persons then subsequently re-registering under a different name can use the same job to qualify for pre-qualification. Now that is always a problem. Both persons cannot be qualified for the same thing. And if we find a situation where it was Ron and Robin company and they're on the pre-qualification list, or they did a job and then they split, and both of them are now claiming that they did that job and they want to be qualified for that, then we will have to query before formalizing the list.
I'm Adisi Rutherford from Weeders Landscaping and Construction. Mr. Bryan, could you give me some elaboration as it relates to the line of credit? Is this isolated to monetary resources from recognized financial institutions? And what proof should I provide as that I have been given this line of credit? Thank you.
The first answer, no. It does not have to be from a bank only. Line of credit, if the ministry invites you to build a fence and it's a timber fence and you come with a line of credit from Guyana Flour Mills, it will not work. If you come with a line of credit letter that is not aged, it's maybe 6 months old or 3 months old, we actually have that written in the bid document. If you go to Demerara Timbers or some other establishment that is able to give you a line of credit, not necessarily finances only, but it's converted to finance. If they're able to give you 10,000 BM of wood, that carries a cost, and it goes into the project, and it's converted toward your payment. Remember again, one of the reasons that we ask for line of credit is in order to maintain the liquidity on the project, or of the contractor on the project, because the ministry or how we conduct our business requires multiple layers of checks and balances before disbursements and so on. This is not an excuse for not meeting something on time. That's not what we're saying. But we're saying if you're able to absorb the material or work at a rate that falls outside of the cycle of how we're able to pay, this is the reason we ask upfront for line of credit, so that you cannot later on say, I'm unable to work because you didn't pay me, you would have interfered with my cash flow and so on. So it does not have to be from a banking institution, or it does not have to speak toward money only, but it can speak toward pertinent materials on the job.
Our next presenter, Mr. Terence Narain, is a procurement specialist. That alone deserves a lot of applause. As I've mentioned to you before, procurement is very boring. It's not exciting at all. It takes a lot of guts to get into it, and it takes a lot of hard work to become a specialist in it. Terence has been doing it for 12 years, and just recently he's completed a project with us at the ministry where he provided specialist procurement support. Terence is a Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supplies alumni, and came through the Guyana Technical Institute and the University of Guyana. And his presentation, I suspect he was already anticipating the question that you asked, could it be a bit more interactive? And his presentation is going to be on the simulation of a bid submission, particularly the do's and don'ts. Let's welcome Terence, please.
Thank you, Robin. Honorable Minister Ferguson, Sharma, special invitees, colleagues, good afternoon. Yes, my task this afternoon is to present on bid submission, the do and the don'ts. What I've tailored the presentation to reflect is the content of the standard bidding document. So when you look at that, you will know it's an extract from any standard document that you see, primarily the one that deals with works above $5 million Guyana dollars. I must state currently that bid submission has been one of the biggest issues, or complete bid submission, that would have affected quite a bit of contractors who would have been in the system before. For those who are new, you can sit back, you can look at the slides, you can understand what must be submitted. In the question and answer segment, we will deal with what are the don'ts, because I know most of you contractors who would have been in the system before would have had issues on submission. As Mr. Wickham would have alluded this morning, a contractor seeing the minutes, see who would have bid the lowest, automatically thinks they would have won the bid. The bid goes way beyond the price. Price is automatically the last thing we look at in any evaluation process. On bid submission, we are covering 3 basic areas. 1 is the bid requirement, 2, the qualification information, and 3, the evaluation criteria. On ending with evaluation criteria, the next speaker will be dealing more in depth with the evaluation. 90% of the slides are taken from the standard bidding document for works that deals with works above $5 million. This is the one that's approved by the National Board and is being used by the Ministry of Public Works or all the agencies for works above $5 million. I'd just like to start with a statement here. A good bid submission could mean the difference between winning or losing an award of contract. As Mr. Wickham would have said this morning, contractors bid, they see they have the lowest price, and they automatically assume they have won the bid. Bidding goes a far way beyond just having a price. There are requirements that must be met for you to be qualified, for you to be evaluated, and finally for you to be awarded a bid or a contract. The basic requirement is taken from ITB 11, documents to be included in the bid, which deals with a works contract above $5 million. Filled in bid form. This is the form that ties the bidder to the bid. Now, after you would have priced your bill of quantities, that price is translated to the bid form, where you fill in the information, you address that to the client, you put in your bid validity period, which will be 90 or 120 days, you state the amount of bid advance required, which could be 10 or 20%, depends on what this draft contract would have said, and your performance bond. Now, the qualification information and documents confirm bidder has a sufficient qualification required for the execution of the contract in case if his bid is accepted. Those information are more validated under the evaluation criteria. The price bill of quantities, this is a must. The bill of quantities would allow you to put in the rate and the total, which would have gone to the grand total, give you a total price in your bid. The bid security. Now, not all bids would require a bid security. Bid security are required only for works above $50 million. Those under 15, most likely you'll find asking for a bid securing declaration. It's a difference. One asks for, one you provide a bond for that, and the other one is simply a declaration that says if you are to default on signing of the contract or accepting the award of contract, you will be debarred from bidding with the agency for a specific period of time. General condition of contract and special condition of contract. In any submission, this is based on a new document and the board issued a few years ago. You must sign each page of the general and the special condition of contract. In some cases, you might find, because it becomes a burdensome issue of you preparing all of these documents and have them photocopied, you might find the agencies modifying this and asking you not to submit that, but that would be an instruction in the instruction to bidders. Alternative offers, in our work scenario over here in Guyana, we do not normally ask for an alternative offers. You simply price what you're given. And then we have power of attorney signing of the bid. For most entities, you would have had a simple business registration, might have had multiple parties on the business registration. Then the power of attorney would indicate who is the lead or who is authorized on that from the registration to sign the bids. In the case of an incorporated company, that has a board of directors, then this corporate secretary most likely would have to be authorized to sign on behalf of that company. It has to be provided power of attorney. For those individuals who will be bidding, you simply provide a statement that says you are the proprietor, you are the only person allowed to bid, and that would be sufficient to serve as a power of attorney. That's for individuals. So you've seen there are three different categories. You have the incorporated company, you have the sole trader of the business, and you have the single entity or single person. Those you're still required to provide that documentation, but it would be in a different format. In most of the bid documents, you will find there's a form, you simply fill it out, and you have it signed by the authorized representative of the company. We look at section 4 of the qualification information. It asks for individual bidders or individual members of the partnership, the legal status. The legal status here deals with what's called a business registration. If you have one, you would have stated that, you attach a copy. This, as indicated before, must be valid. And it's renewable at the board date of that company. It's not renewed in January anymore, but depends on when you would have registered. Place of registration, because there are multiple offices. There's Georgetown, there's Essequibo. You can state exactly where your registration was obtained from. The kind of business would be either an individual, a sole trader, or an incorporated business again. And the power of attorney referred to here again, you must attach a copy of that. The total volume of work for the last 2 years, this here would either stand alone as it is, or it might be modified in the evaluation criteria to say maybe 3 years or 5 years, and you want an annual turnover maybe 100,000 or $1 million or tens of millions. Experience of the prime contractor in the last 2 years, the value indicating $1. This is a simple format provided in the qualification information section. It indicates the item with an item number, project name and location, name of employer and their telephone numbers, item of works and year of completion, value of the contract. Once you have filled out this in this exact format, it gives the agency or the procurement agency a chance to validate or to verify that you would have done these works. When you provide the information without the contact information or who you would have done the work for, it's difficult for the agencies to evaluate and verify that you would have done a job, let's say $20 million for Ministry of Education, or for the Region 6, they cannot validate that because you don't have the information there. So you need to provide those information so there can be due diligence done in the evaluation process. We look again at 1.4, the items of equipment. In the qualification information section here, normally the equipment are not stated, but in the evaluation criteria section, they will state exactly what are the equipment required. You are required to provide a letter of lease for the equipment if you don't own it, or you can have the registration or an affidavit of ownership from a legal practitioner that says you own these equipment. We understand that most of the contractors in dealing with heavy-duty equipment do not register those equipment. For that reason, you're allowed to provide the affidavit of ownership. Because most of these equipment are working out of the public, as such they're not required to have a registration, even though they're legally imported. But the proof of ownership, you can have the letter from the JP or a legal professional. We look again here at the experience of the employees. In any project, you would want maybe a project manager, depends on the complexity, a foreman, a quality inspector, an engineer. You will have to provide details of these personnel. In this form, you fill out the name of the person, the years of experience, and the years of experience in a similar position. You have to validate this 1.5 by providing a detailed CV of the individual. We've gone to an extent of including in each bid document now a statement of consent, because we have found in quite a number of cases the person who is proposed as a manager or the engineer doesn't exist, would have migrated 10 years ago, or the CV was just put into the document without their knowledge of it. So we have asked now that the individual sign that statement of consent, allowing the contractor to use their CV. Because most of you shortcut the system because you know they might not be able to find this person. You put somebody's CV in there you had from 20 years ago and expect us to accept. But we do the due diligence. We do verify that these people exist. And when it comes to execution, then you can't find the engineer or you can't find the project manager because he's not there. Main subcontractor. If the document allows subcontracting, then you can state the subcontractor that you wish to use. In most of the documents, subcontracting is limited to maybe 10 to 20% of the works. So it's not allowable that you would take a job and then you subcontract 100% out to somebody. If you're doing that from the premise of you bidding, then you must state who are the subcontractors you expect to use. Those would be validated before you're allowed to use those subcontractors. This is a bit different from the other subcontractors. It's simply you have a job that might have exceeded your capacity, you need support, you're allowed to do that. NIS, GRA compliances, again, you have to show supporting documents, and these must be valid at the time of bidding. The action taken by the tender board of recent is that you're allowed maybe a day or two to submit because we know the issues that no compliance are issued before the expiration dates. You might have a long holiday and your document expires during the holiday, or it expires on a Monday and your bid is due for a Tuesday. So tender board is allowed that those documents be submitted after the opening. Litigation. This form here for litigation, you must fill that out. If you have a litigation, if you don't have one, you put a statement that says no. If you have a litigation, then you must state the litigation could work for or against you in terms of evaluation. Litigation in this sense would mean that you have a prior case, or within the last 2 years you would have had an issue of litigation. In this sense, the data is required because when you have a litigation, it must be assessed. Litigation simply means you become a high-risk contractor. The fact is litigation might go against you. It may be for a large sum, and it affects your net assets. So in the evaluation process, we look at the litigation. We look at how much you stand to lose if the litigation goes against you. Then we determine if you are a high-risk contractor or you can be still engaged in a contract. So it works in your benefit, it could work against you, but you need to supply that information. Not providing that information or not stating, having a litigation statement automatically disqualifies you. It's a mandatory submission. Right? As I said before, it's about risk. If you are a contractor who would have had previous litigation, it simply means, or if it will still be a court matter, then you might not be as liquid as you are currently when this litigation is finally dealt with in the courts, and might affect your performance on maybe quite a large project. So it puts the ministry or the procurement agency at risk. Because if litigation goes against you and you are to lose quite a bit in terms of financing, then how can you perform the job? Evidence of access to financial resources to meet the qualification requirement. We deal here with cash in hand or line of credit. As Mr. Bryan would have said before, the lines of credit need to be applicable to your project. If you're dealing with construction, then it could be for construction material from Gafoor. Gafoor's tools here are one of those places because they do give that credit line. If you have cash in hand, a bank statement, if you can get a loan arrangement from the bank, you must provide those documentation, right? So you can't just say you have cash in hand or you have a line of credit. You have to get a letter of line of credit from the supplier. You have to get your bank statements, or you have to get a loan arrangement from the bank that states specifically how much money you are or you will be having available. In terms of the line of credit and the cash in hand, you must also provide something called a document or a letter that states you authorize the agency to verify these lines of credit or the cash in hand or the bank statement. In most cases, the banks are very protective people. Even if you say you have a bank statement, say you have 10 million, you cannot call the bank and verify the man has 10 million. The bank would not give you those information, but you have to send an authorization to seek reference from the bank. When that authorization comes, we can verify, take to the bank and verify you actually have cash, or you have a credit line, or you have access to finances that can support the project. Same with from a supplier, you must provide that authorization for us to verify from the supplier that he or she is giving you a line of credit to support your project. So it's not just a piece of paper you put together, you have to send the authorization with that line of credit. For partnership or syndicates, as the gentleman would have asked earlier, he was talking about splitting or having multiple contractors on a single project in various stages. In this case here, it deals with qualification. If a single entity cannot qualify based on the requirements of the bid, you can do what's called a joint venture or a consortium, or have an arrangement where multiple parties enter the agreement to meet the requirement of the bid. So these are the information that you'll have to provide. Information requested in 1.1 and 1.8, as I would have mentioned before. Attach a power of attorney, because in a partnership arrangement, one of the parties has to authorize the other, one other member of the party to sign those documents on behalf of the consortium or the partnership. And the specific agreement that's being entered by the parties to meet the requirement of the bid must be supplied. So you will see who is the lead party, who is the one who will be receiving the payment once the contract is awarded. Those are the information that must be contained in the agreement between those parties. Because if we engage in a contract partnership, then both parties cannot receive payment. One party will receive the payment. So you'll have to work with the arrangement of how you're going to get your part from the main person in the partnership. As it says here, B, one of the partners shall be nominated as being in charge and authorized to incur liability to receive instruction on behalf of all partners of the partnership. So that would be the lead personnel, the lead party in the arrangement. Right? The execution of the entire contract, including payment, shall be done exclusively by the partner in charge. He is the person we'll be dealing with. He is the person responsible. This will be signed, full name, the position may be the manager will sign, and the signature will seal of the company, and dated. You must sign and date this as you would have signed and dated the bid submission form. That's for the bid submission requirements. If we go back, this refers specifically to clause 11, ITB 11 of the documents, of the standard bidding document. So when you pick up a bid document, go straight to clause 11, once above 5 million, you will see exactly this here. So when you're compiling your bid, you don't need to submit back the instruction to bidders, the advertisement, the drawings. Those are not to be submitted again. You simply submit what's asked for here and the evaluation criteria. So automatically that reduces your submission. You might have a document 200 pages long. So now you're reducing by 40, maybe 40 pages. So you have less to photocopy. So when you're compiling your original and your copies, you're compiling less than what you would have received with the additional information aside. So this would reduce your cost based on how much you submit. Most contractors would have photocopied the entire document. That's not necessary. Only take out what's required. Now the evaluation criteria. This here validates what I would have on the qualification information section. Valid company registration. You must have a valid registration. Compliance certificate, NISGRA, you must submit valid ones. Form of tender signed. Not signing means you have not submitted the bid, so you're automatically out. Work program is an automatic requirement for any bid submission. the agency would want to assess how you plan on doing the work and how can you execute within the time period given. Financial statement for the last 3 years, this is normally asked for individuals, income and expenditure statement. For businesses, income and expenditure statement. For incorporated companies, you need to submit audited financial statement, which includes balance sheet, income and expenditure, and the notes of the audit. So the 3 categories, there are 2 similar submissions for the businesses and this individual, whereas for the incorporated company, you have a third document to submit, which is the notes to the audit. So you must be distinct with that. If you are an incorporated company, you can't submit balance sheet alone. You are judged on a different category because of your status. Method statement, this here might be asked for, might not be asked for, depending on the project. It simply outlines in a narrative how you plan on doing the job. Now, we're quite clear, we know any building project, road project, you can't start from the top. You have to start from the bottom. So you can write that out simply, how you plan executing. You start with your excavation for a road work, you go to your sub-base, your base, then you go to your surface layer, put it in a narrative. Look at the quality control mechanism, look at the quality control plan in your methodology. Look at the procurement of material. So you need to be able to state to the client, this is how I plan on doing it. If I'm going to get material from maybe Tulsi, then you can state that. If you're bringing in special long lead items, let's say you have to import material from overseas, then you need to state how you're going to do that and when you're going to do that, because those are going to affect the project, right? So you need to state in a narrative, state exactly how you plan on doing the project. Record of past experience of similar works. As the previous form would have dictated, you need to set that out in that format, state who you would have worked for, when you would have worked for them, how long was the project, contact information for the person, and the value. Those would help to assess your past experience of similar project. Required bid security. This is, as I said, is dependent on the size of the project. Under 15 million for works, you will not require bid security. You'll be required to provide a bid securing declaration. The bid security in this case would not be a percentage, but it would be an actual fixed figure. And you can provide that, and you must provide it in the format provided as well as the number of days. It must be valid for a number of days. Access to financial resources, the benchmark we use here is about 30% of the bid. So you must be able to provide that you have 30% of the bid value as cash in hand or lines of credit. And you must provide the documentation to prove that. And then it goes again, authorization from the bidder to seek reference on the bidder's bank or surety. The surety here would be your creditors. The bank here would be the bank you're getting a loan arrangement from, or you actually have cash in bank draft or cash in hand. Power of attorney of the bid, that's again, as I explained before, depending on the type of business, you will need to provide that. Even as an individual, you must provide a letter indicating that you are the person and you are the only authorized signatory to all bid or contracts. Matters of litigation, you will do the statement, either yes or no. If you have litigation in the past, you will state using the form in the qualification information to outline all the details required under this heading here. And the completed price bill of quantities. The new document that we're using doesn't allow you to leave blank spaces in the BOQ. If you fail to fill in the price for an item, you're deemed to have an incomplete BOQ and you're disqualified. Under the international system, World Bank, IDB, if you leave an item out or blank, then it's deemed that you've absorbed that cost on another item. For our local procurement, that's not possible. You leave an item out, you're automatically disqualified because you have an incomplete bill, right? So you must price every item. If you have an issue or you're not sure how to price it, you can always seek clarification during the bidding period. And the clarification can be addressed and you can be guided as to how to prepare that. I know when you look around all the agencies, the bills are different. And some might be confusing, some you might not understand. We deal with both the metric and the imperial system. And we've had cases where people misinterpret the metric and use imperial prices. And that would have created an issue for them because the price would be extremely low. And for that reason, they cannot accept the contract. So you have to be careful. If you're a metric, you get your conversions right, use the right prices for your imperial bills, ensure you get the right prices, and you sort that. Do not leave any blank spaces. Any item that you have to price that goes on price deems an incomplete bill, and you'll be disqualified automatically. So even if you have the lowest prices, then you're out. Main equipment. This is dependent on the type of project. In a road project, these are about the standard equipment that we require. For large, complex project, you may require multiple pieces of each equipment. For building project, it would be different. You have to provide proof of ownership, lease or rental agreement. As I said here before, most of the heavy-duty equipment are not registered. So you must provide an affidavit of ownership. If you have registration, you can provide those registrations as copies in your bid to verify you own these equipment. Right? The other thing we have found too as well is a main contractor is bidding for a project and he would have given a letter of lease for the same equipment that he has to another contractor bidding for the same project. Now, who are we going to give the project to? Suppose they're both eligible for multiple projects on the same lot. Then if the prime contractor who owns the equipment is going to lease to him, then it might put you in some jeopardy. Depends on how the evaluators look at it. So if you're helping a friend out and you own the equipment, ensure you're not bidding for the same project. Right? I know you want to help somebody out, but don't do it because it will create an issue for you. If you have one piece, if you have multiple pieces of the equipment and you want to give somebody a lease, do that because you have for yourself to do the project. Key personnel, civil engineer or site engineer qualification. We will ask for the specific qualification. We will ask for a number of years of experience. You must provide detailed CVs for these persons. You can't just say the person is a civil engineer and he has 3 years experience. You have to give the name and give a complete CV so we can assess that person's qualification. Because you can be bidding for a road project, but the engineer you're using only would have worked on building projects for the last 10 years. So he would have had no road experience. Then he would not be an applicable person for that project. Right? If you just say an engineer, it would not work. Have the detailed CV. You might have a specialization, an engineer who has soil experience. Then you have to show in a CV, you have to show that you would have done X and Y, Z soil testing over a period so he understands exactly what he needs to do. The foreman experience here again, you must provide a CV, show all the jobs they would have worked on, maybe have a contact number for them so we can verify that they are existing. Surveyor, same thing again, detailed CV. I know some surveyors are not keen on giving out their CVs. They give a letter. That works sometimes, it doesn't work sometimes, but we can always request or verify who they are. Right? Statement of consent of key personnel, you must have this. As I said before, most times these people doesn't exist. They've migrated 10, 15 years ago, or their CVs might have been put into the document without their knowing. So the statement of consent and their signature would verify that they are allowing you to use their document for your qualification purposes. Financial assessment. So we have gone through the qualification requirement. We have gone through the evaluation criteria, right? The technical aspect criteria. Now we look at the financial assessment. Now, the financial assessment here, any bidder who receives a no in any of the criteria above shall be non-responsive. So if you receive a no in any one of the sections above or before we have mentioned there, you're automatically disqualified. So your prices become irrelevant. Right? The contract will be awarded to the bidder who bid is determined to be substantially responsive to the bid and who has offered the lowest evaluated price. This is written in the laws of Guyana, the Procurement Act. It says the lowest qualified bidder. Qualified means you must meet all of the requirements. If you can't meet the requirement, don't bid. Right? So I would advise all the newcomers here, all the people who would have been before, would have had issues, look at your qualification information when you buy it. Before you buy a bid document, look at the evaluation criteria. Do not invest money into buying bids and you can't meet the requirement. I only spoke to a bidder yesterday. He said he had already spent over $1 million on buying bid documents and he hasn't won a single bid for the year. But the point is, it's a competitive environment. You have to understand who your competitors are. You have to be able to compete. And you're competing on prices. And you're competing on the quality of document that you submit. You must be able to meet that criteria. So it would be unwise for you as a newcomer to go buy in a bid document, and then you can't meet the requirement. You'll be expending money you can't recover. So my advice to you, all the agencies allow you to review the document before you buy it. Go to the agency, ask to see the document, you review the document first. You think you can meet the criteria, you have the necessary skills, staffing and the equipment, purchase, and you go. Go ahead and bid. Any questions you have during the bidding period, you write the agency, they will, as a query, they will respond to you. The end. Thank you very much. Any questions?
My name is Marilyn Hyacinth from Golden IT Management. And Could you go back to section 1X? Yeah.
Yes.
What happens if you've never bid in Guyana before, but you've been in business in the United States? How do you fill this form?
All right, let me explain to you. Our Procurement Act does not exclude foreign bidders from competing or bidding for any local projects. So if you work in the US, you don't have a business registration, you state that. Because you're an entity or you would ascend, you have a registration over in the US, you can submit that registration. You bid as an overseas entity. You don't have to be a local entity to bid for local jobs. The Act allows that. So your paperwork would not be local, you'll be exempt from providing as an overseas bidder, no compliance is required. So NIS insurance is exempted, your paying local tax is also exempted because you're a foreigner, and you bid based on your overseas credentials and the documentation.
Thank you.
That's written in the Act. So you'll not be breaking any rules or breaking any laws.
My name is Chris speaking once again from King's Construction. You said if you cannot fulfill the requirement, do not bid. So many things are going through my mind right now, so let me start from a point. For the last few years, there have been marginalization and discrimination in our country. And a system has been created, it seems to me, to keep out certain poor people. Because how can someone show a track record for the last 5 years and you're not being given the opportunity to get one contract to show financial statements, audit financial statements for the last 5 years? So it's obviously that certain people in this country is being marginalized and it's being continued. So my question is simple. You try to fulfill all the criteria and then you say that, okay, one, you take out one, automatically you disqualify. So my criteria is now you go to an insurance company and they give you a bid bond. And then next thing you know, the government is accepting this insurance company because you find this insurance company okay facilitating you because you see that you have your structures in place. And then next thing you hear, this insurance company, they're not accepting this insurance or the big bond anymore. So you have to go to another insurance company to get a big bond. When you go to another insurance to get a big bond, they're showing this, and they say this is the law, bam, to you. I could carry back in 1992 when I used to bid. It wasn't so stringent, but I know for various reasons these things are to put in place. So what can we do to help people who might be qualified, have experience, but not to have the financial assistance to go there and perform? We need jobs in this country, man, and it's getting frustrated. I used to do construction back in the days, and I leave this country and go to the various countries, and people open you with wide arms, and we building places in the Caribbean. And when you come to Guyana, you see this thing in front of your face that you cannot have access to a job. So we really want to see this about. Well, what I'm asking, what is the government willing to do to flex so we can get opportunities we can have access to a job when we come and we facing this here in our face? If you don't take off this criteria, so it doesn't make sense to me. I get emotional, sorry, right? I really get emotional. Okay. I'm sorry, because it reaches a point of frustration. It reaches a point of frustration. So what is the government willing to do to give us opportunity to perform? Make it a level and a fair playing field that to make small contractors who are qualified and who could go there and perform. We're asking for an opportunity to perform. What you all are willing to do instead of pushing this in our face.
If I may answer your question, apparently you missed the entire presentation before Mr. Philip Ryan. He did pre-qualification. That's where you have to start. Right? The pre-qualification would have been closed for every year. They are now working on a process. Yeah.
I asked Mr. Bryan what's the cost of the pre-qualification.
The fact is the government is willing to open up pre-qualification for multiple times in a year is a step in helping the smaller bidders to come into the system.
You asked me to pre-qualify, right? There are various reasons. Here, I know you're in a job, and today, tomorrow,
I go.
you know where your bread is buttered and where it's coming from, but you could smile at me. I know, I'm speaking on my behalf personally, and I know a lot of people out there facing the same thing with regards. There are various reasons why people might not pre-qualify, for various reasons. I don't want to go into that. Right? I asked the gentleman just now, the engineer, who was explaining us pre-qualification. I asked him a question. I know the reason why I asked him the question. If it would be considered, because sometimes it seems to me that certain people don't be considered at all, even if it pre-qualify or not. I have seen the system, sir. I have known the system. I was one of the youngest contractors in the 90s. And I see the system as being created. So what I'm asking, if opportunities could be created for young, upcoming contractors to get an opportunity to go out there and perform, and what the government is willing to do that. Because what you're telling us here, I understand everything you're telling us here. I don't want to go into it.
We cannot give absolute definite answers to everything. As we said before, the reason we are having this conference is to educate, and for us is to fact find. We are aware that the procurement system and the process conducted by the government must evolve. There are certain factors which would influence that evolution. We're seeing quite passionate folks here who we want to entertain and accommodate moving forward. The reason we're having this conference is to address these concerns, which are dear, delicate, and passionate. So just let me underscore again. We did not come here today with the answers to everything that we will face. I will attempt to answer my brother's question there. Pre-qualification and the facilitation of new entrants is specifically focused and set up to address issues like you have just elaborated on. As Mr. Ryan said earlier to Ms. Hyacinth, if you have overseas experience, you can present that. That is one. Two, if you are pre-qualified, by stating in the application form how you're able to handle complex jobs based on what you're able to access, you're saying, hold on, you're saying you may have issues with what you can access and so on. But just imagine, just let me finish. Just let me finish. Just imagine you inviting somebody to build your fence. What method would you use to establish what the market, just let me finish, what the market can do and so on. Now, what's your name? King. So I want you to understand, we are evolving. We are taking these concerns and we will scrutinize and interrogate what we have and what we work with a view, with an objective to facilitate people such as you and others here who may have not articulated their concerns, their position, and their frustration. This is the objective of this exercise. We cannot give you certain, definite, this is what we have planned to do as yet. The government must evolve. Our methods must evolve. We must change. That is why we're here, to present to you our posture to accommodate these concerns and to change?
My name is Colin Ben from CB1 Construction and a member of Guyana General Contractors Association. My question today is a question I think my brother tried to ask, and if his question is really supposed to be answered, it was supposed to be by the minister. I think there is a lot of young contractors here that want to get into the system. And what has been presented to us today is a big barrier. We can't get past that barrier. We are here and would like to know what is it in place for us to get into the system. We don't want to hear now about the criteria, because the criteria will always be the criteria. We would like to get into the system. We would like to know how you all can assist us as young contractors, young suppliers coming up to get into the system. That's one. Two, how can it, Mr. Minister, I might be straying a little bit, but you're here, let me get a point to you. How can you, or the government of the day, say that they're willing to assist us as young upcoming contractors? And there goes, we look in the papers and we see you bring in Chinese contractor to build domestic house in Guyana. This has never happened in the history of Guyana. And we would never allow it to happen. Guyanese leave Guyana and go abroad. And when I say go abroad, I'm not stretching far, just around the Caribbean. And this is how construction boom take place around the Caribbean. When the government has work for its people, they give it out to the local contractors and allow the local contractors to go and source workers from around the Caribbean to come and build. Now we're going to China. How can we go to China and we have the same resources what the rest of the Caribbean people is clamoring for to build these houses, and you bring in Chinese? Can you tell us where would we fit in? And when, Mr. Minister, because we're hungry, we get children that want to work. We want to work for free, we're cheering them to send them to school, and we ain't getting it. Thank you.
That's your answer. Yes, that's what I'm hearing. That's your answer. All right, since my senior is not here, and I guess he might do a better job than I would try to do. But anyway, to answer your question, my dear, how the government can assist. I mean, the process starts today. The Ministry of Public Infrastructure, I guess you would have heard it in Minister Patterson's opening address to you here this morning, that after we took office, many persons, every day you're getting people coming to the ministry asking to get into the system. And we see the need to help you, the smaller contractors, to help you. That is why we have this symposium here this morning. We had presentations coming out from GRA, NIS, even the Ministry of Public Infrastructure. So what you have to do, my friend, you got to start the ball rolling, because Minister Patterson would have said earlier that we at the ministry level, we have limitations up to $14 million projects. So what would normally happen, once you're pre-qualified, I mean, we might have lists of contractors on our records, but the pre-qual process will recommence or reopen in September of 2016. That's why we're having this forum here today. So with all the information that we give to you here today, it is for you now to go and empower yourself, equip yourself, get yourself in order. submit your documents to the ministry. And when we have projects, $14 million project, because you got to start creeping. You can't start big to contest with the BKs, the knots, and I can go on and on. So what is happening here is that once you get yourself fully equipped, then you submit, you become part of the ministry's database, and then when projects come on stream, we would be able to extract your names and invite you to submit those bid documents. So that's how I understand the pre-qualification process to work, right? Like you, I am learning too. You understand me? So that is why, and I keep emphasizing this point, that is why we are here, so that you can be educated. The Ministry of Public Infrastructure, we have started the ball rolling by simply inviting you to this process. To answer your other question with regards to Chinese coming in, I think we would have to defer those questions and your concern to the Ministry of Communities, because I don't know what process they use. So I don't know if my colleague here, Minister Sharma, has more information to provide. I will invite him to do so. But this is the furthest I can go. So I trust that you understand my position. So, Minister Sharma?
I understand your concerns and your frustration, but let me get an idea what this audience is all about. This symposium, as I started out, I commended the Ministry of Public Infrastructure for the initiative. I did say government approved a $230 billion budget, and under the Public Infrastructure Ministry, they have $30.6 billion. Now this symposium is about, it's a question I'm asking, is this symposium about the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, or is it about all government work? Because if it is about public infrastructure, then all of you have to be contractors that are building roads, stellions, airstrips, sea defense. Is that the case? Everybody is qualified here to do that kind of work? Well, the answer is no. That's the reason why the question was posed by that gentleman. Because the information being shared here is basically for the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, and they're saying to you what their process is. However, government work, in terms of the 20% I mentioned, doesn't mean it's public infrastructure. It means it goes for every single ministry of government. It goes for the local authorities, the NDCs. It goes for the RDC. It goes for public cooperation. So this is where your extent in terms of doing business with government goes. So this requirement here is to give you a general understanding what is the requirement for public infrastructure. So you're a plumber, you're an electrician. You don't want a $40 million or $100 million project. I don't think you want that. If it's that you want, you have to qualify in terms of what you're being taught here. But if you're looking for $100,000 or $200,000 or $500,000 project, well, then any ministry could give you that, because there's various level of procurement. So in the Procurement Act, they speak about the ministerial tender board, departmental tender board, regional tender board, the national tender board. There's also district tender board for the NDC, which have to be implemented. So the information, I think you're getting a little nervous because you realize now is very technical and there's blockage. So what I understand the gentleman is asking about, if government is prepared to have a special arrangement for persons, if they're willing to forego certain requirements. That is your question. Well, if that is your question, this will have to be taken up by the cabinet. As a minister in government, I will have to put this before cabinet. So none of us are pronouncing it. But as a gentleman mentioned earlier, a senior individual, the guy that mentioned about the honey and lime issue, That man, if you listen to him, what he's saying is that we are a poor country, we have poor contractors, we have poor engineers, we have poor everything. If we should let go of this criteria that we ask you, we're going to be following what that man's fear is. We're going to be poor in everything. So you want me to weaken the system to allow you to get on board. So basically, that is the situation government will have to make. If indeed we could allow the system to be so adjusted so persons could be given an opportunity to benefit. But as I mentioned, you could benefit from a permanent secretary. A permanent secretary have a limit, and his limit is like 180,000 to 600,000. So in a ministry, you could benefit from him. You don't have to come to this tedious process. So as government, as a minister, I could propose and say, ministries and permanent secretaries should ensure that contractors, and we should have all their names and business registration with these various backgrounds, should be given those smaller jobs. And then you could graduate to the larger jobs. So that is the way we could proceed. Thank you.
My first question was addressing the last speaker, Mr. Norine, when he was talking about the criteria, and he was speaking about the criteria and all of that, and you have, if there is no, you're ready to go. But I understand all of that, but throughout all the ages, I always had a public discourse, and I was waiting for an opportunity like this to discuss the final one, the price, the estimate cost. I think it's a complete disrespect to the engineer and to the intelligence of some persons when a contract is awarded. Engineer tender $4 million and a contract award for $2 million or $1.8 million. That's an insult to my intelligence. You have prepared that contract to fail. You have prepared a contract to substandard work. How can $1.8 million do a $4 million job? They can't even buy the materials, right? And they keep querying it for years, and they keep telling me the Procurement Act said it, the lowest evaluated tender. I said I want to know about the price. It does evaluate the price. The price must be sensible. It must make sense. When I saw this in the papers, I had many duties to do today. I postponed all of that because I want to be at this forum, because I know we're dealing. When I watch all the listed on the agenda, I said, this is the forum in the beginning. I want to discuss this because it's an insult to the engineer who's qualified, who's had the task to prepare this, and he's telling you it's $4 million, and you could award it to 1.8. Yes. Right? It's not right. You prepare the project to fail for substandard work. So when you blame the contractor, I blame the person that awarded the job and not the contractor. Right? Two, that's for you, Mr. Norine. You want to deal with that first? And the other one is off to deal with my brother. I understand what my brother is saying, right? And I was getting to it, His Honorable Mr. Sharma spoke about. We heard about 40 million ceiling. We hadn't heard about the flooring, right? The flooring will suit our little contractors coming in, where you have emergency work, quotation work, and all these kind of things, where you don't have to the big contractors run in. We have some little bridges to repair across the trenches. Give the small contractors quotation, 600,000, call them and give them. So they will build capacity. I heard Mr. Wickham talk about capacity building. That's the way they're going to build capacity. They were in that job. They want to have finance. A man, you know your creditors, they know you. You never had a bad credit, but creditors know you. They're dealing with who they're accustomed to buying at them all the year. It's wrong. It's not easy for they get a line of credit. Some people don't mess up. Some of the bad mess up the creditors. They don't want credit anymore. They owe them hundreds of millions of dollars. So they won't want to give a small contract to come and see easy. You could build his capacity by giving him a small job, quotation, emergency kind of job. That is my advice. I believe when you come with a problem, if you got a solution, don't take it for granted. He has always got a solution. Make suggestions of solutions, and they will work with that in the quiet moment. Thank you very much.
If I may answer your first question, I think the engineer estimate should form the basis of every evaluation, especially the price. What has happened over the years is that the evaluators are not very keen or not very skilled in evaluation. And because of that reason, They look at what they access the lowest qualified bidder, and they do not evaluate the price and price properly. What I can tell you for sure, good evaluators would write a justification and tell you that the price is too low. They can't buy the material, right? Good engineers would do, good evaluators would do that, but what you're talking about happens in the regions. I know pretty clear it happens, but for Ministry of Public Infrastructure, I tell you clearly, what ministry has done is two things. They write the contractors, validate your prices, verify your prices. Can you do it for that price? And most of the times you find they say no. They can't do it because they would have made a mistake or they would have bid too low. But the low price and the low award, low prices happens in some of the other areas where the evaluators aren't very skilled at justifying why the price, why the contracts not go to the lowest. And it happens. What happens in some agencies, they have a cutoff point. A minimum or a maximum over the estimates. Once you're within those or outside of those limits, you're automatically out. They look for the one who will give you the best price in a sense. So for your question, it happens. I hope it's not very widespread, but I've known of cases before. But there are certain procedures that must be followed in evaluation that you can't deal with those extremely low prices. I think the other speaker would deal with those. And one of the things that the ministry can do, or any agency, if the bidder still insists on doing it for that price, is up the performance bond. So they become a high-risk contractor, but the risk is mitigated by having a bigger bond. Right? But that's how it's supposed to happen.
My name is Mandy.
I hope this one is on bid submission, right?
Yes, it is.
All right.
I am not a contractor.
Yes.
But I am sitting here and I am listening. Now, within this room, and from what I've been hearing, this forum was designed to have newcomers. Yeah. Now, coming with newcomers, you have limited experience. And my knowledge in project management teaches me that experience is one of the key things that you guys have been looking for. Now, the contention that I come with, if these are young entrepreneurs that are now coming into the business, capital becomes a big issue for them. Some people struggle just to purchase the bid document, much less the equipments and machineries that comes behind. The question that contents me most is that these people go through all extremes to come into these bidding forums. Some of them do not have business registration. They try to comply with the rules. Now, based on your presentation where you addressed the lady from the overseas forum, you were saying that the NIS and GRA compliance is wafered.
Yeah.
I would like to ask, why is that so? Because we as Guyanese have to take the harassment and the headache of going to get these documents, why they should be wafered. The next question that comes to mind is, we're talking about a level playing field and equity for our young entrepreneurship. So why should they be given preference over us? That is why we've been faced with the situation of buy-shelling, giving concessions on all of these benefits, while our locals were being suffocated. Now, based on what I'm seeing happening and looking at this forum, what is going on here, our ministers are willing and they're trying their utmost best, which I am pleased with, to see ways and means of which they can try to bring our young people in. But at the same time, some of these young people barely know what is the whole process of procurement. Now here we have a forum, look around. Look how many empty seats here. These forums should be spread to our regions, all 10 of them. And I tell you why. One of the positions that I hold is a regional councillor. And within our region, as my brother over there was saying about quotation work, a lot of our young contractors do not get quotation work. You know who the quotation work goes to? The friends of the engineers and relatives of the engineers. It does not go to the people who actually need the work. And let me tell you what is it. The engineer's estimate might be $4 million, right? When you go into bid or the tendering process, you see a man come out with the work for $2 million, and right away you know it's the work that you're going to be getting, as some people said, is shaft. You're getting shaft, right? I'm being frank. The point is, when these things come up under the previous administration, there was nowhere you could have gone. You had to take it and stay quiet. Now we have a new administration, and I'm hoping that these things will change. And when I tell you change, I'm not just saying change as in change 2 words. Change as in a whole new policy. I want to start seeing policies. right? And I'm hoping as a recommendation out of this forum that we can have a policy that says new contractors or new entrepreneurs that are coming into the contracting services, X, Y, and Z might be the requirement. However, because they are new contractors, we are willing to wafer or find some ways and means to bring them into the system for a period of time. So then you give them the opportunity to create themselves, to get themselves aligned. After that, if they fail to comply, well, then you got all right to kick them out. I agree with you. But to stand here and say that this is the process, this is what you're supposed to go through, but I can't go through it because 1, I don't have finances, 2, I don't have machinery, 3, I have no experience. But here is it, a youngster is willing to get up rather than sit down and beg for 200 every day. He's willing to get up to go and earn a little bit. So there's an old saying that goes, one dirty bill dam. And I tell you why I use that statement. If we can create a little policy that just help these small contractors, baby contractors, to get on board. Once they come on board and they start to earn, they will be able to live their standards. They will then have a little bit of capital. They will be able to purchase a few equipments. After that process is completed, we can then move them upwards and bring in a new batch. And then you wouldn't have people dependent on anybody anymore. So this afternoon, I want to say that I want to congratulate our ministers for doing this. And ministers, I do hope that you pay a little attention to my little recommendation. Yes. Because we do not want people to say, oh, I need a job. We know the government cannot create a job for everybody. But if we create policies in which we can earn, then Guyana is definitely on the move. Thank you.
I'm feeling real proud and amused about the coalition government. And the step that we make to get the views of poor people and some rich people. My question is not a question to bombard my ministers or anything around what my ministers are doing. But what I know is that a small man going to be the real man, and I applaud my sister for a recommendation. That is all I have to say.
The next presentation is on the bid evaluation process. Now, I know a lot of really good points have come out of today's presentation, and a lot of persons have talked about the need for certain policy changes or modifications. But right now, the process that we work with, it is a process that is written in law. And of course, any law can be changed. But what Mr. Rahman is going to point out, and what we just had from Mr. Terence Narain, are presentations on the process as it stands today. No matter what modifications you make to the policy, you always will be in need of some process by which you evaluate the different competitors for any project. If you have 10 jobs and you have 20 newcomers, you still have to find 10 out of the 20. So there's always going to be the need for some process. Whether you agree with the policy behind it, whether you think it needs to be modified, that's fine. You can discuss that. That can be changed. But there needs to be a process. And what Mr. Rahman, who is the Chief Roads Officer at the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, will be presenting on, is the bid evaluation process as we do it right now.
Honorable Minister Ferguson, Minister Sharma, special invitees, working colleagues, contractors, suppliers. My task is very simple. Once you have done everything that everybody said, then you'll be compliant. We go to the price, lowest evaluated bidder won the price, but it's not so simple. As Robin said, the evaluation process follows some guidelines, and I will go through those guidelines with you. But just to follow up on some of the questions I've been hearing, we talk about the small contractors getting it. We talk about simple 3 quotation methods. Now, 3 quotation method can be a very small sum, but what happens? You go and get 3 quotations from 3 different suppliers. Before you award it to one, you still have to go through a bid evaluation process. I have been with the ministry where sometimes you see persons coming with quotation from one supplier. or a job is being recommended to one supplier, then you have to ask that person, can I have a look at the quotation you're receiving? We hear the case where jobs are being given to friends of persons that they're engineers and other persons. Now, the person who is signing off that contract, generally at the ministerial level, will be the PS. And I know of umpteen time where those persons will have to answer to the PS, why is it that we're going along those routes? Now, the only way you will get past that is if you have proper justification, you went through an evaluation process that follow policies. So why is we saying that the jobs are being given to individuals, and before it's being given, an evaluation have to be done, and it have to be approved by someone because payment will have to be made. So I just want to say that in terms of some persons saying that they're given to friends, at the end of the day, most times, evaluation have to be done. So this afternoon, I will just go through the evaluation process. And we all heard a lot about the Procurement Act. This is a copy of the Procurement Act. It's not a big document. You can simply run through it and it will give you everything you need to know in terms of procurement. Now, just to simply recap, this has been said all morning. It's just a simple layman view of the bid evaluation process. So simply for us, what you do is you purchase a bidding document, or the bids go out, we put it in the newspaper, said the ministry have so-and-so jobs available, and we put a date when that bidding document will be available for inspection, and it's also a cost to purchase that bidding document. Once you purchase it, you fill up the necessary documentation, which was mentioned by Terence Narain. All of those forms, all of those conditions have to be filled. Then you have a bid opening, the bid submission and the bid opening. Then you have the bid evaluation. Then you have the board's approval. And then there's a award of contract. This is very layman terms of what the bidding process is. Good. So you've heard a lot about the laws of Guyana. So the bidding evaluation process, what are the evaluators guided by? They're guided by the laws of Guyana, Procurement Act 2003, and Section 3 of that act talk about evaluation of tenders. Other to that, they are guided by the bidding document. And within the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, what we have done, because we noticed some of the bidders make very simple slips, and because of that, they are disqualified. So the very first page of our bidding document is a simple checklist to show every single thing that you need to submit. So once you have GRA, you tick, you tick, you tick. So it makes it very more user-friendly to make sure that contractor complies with what is required. So we have the checklist. Other to that, we have the instruction of bidders, which is general. And then we have the qualification information. And in that is the evaluation criteria. And the evaluation criteria, as pointed out by my previous colleague, Terence Narain, you have the non-financial and then you have the financial. And it was also stated that if you have a no in the non-financial, you will not go on to the financial. Good. What the National Procurement and Tender Administration have done, they have also prepared several guidelines, and this is one of the guidelines. They have prepared standard evaluation criteria handbook for pre-qualification and bidding. And what their document says that, what are the basic principles in terms of bid evaluation? The evaluation work must be strictly conducted on a basis of impartiality and fairness, with due attention to the consideration of economy, efficiency, transparency, and non-discrimination among eligible bidders. And that is what we all are here for, to make sure those things are carried out. So what is some of the things set out in the Procurement Act? Now, the Procurement Act, in terms of Clause 35, submission of tenders, I just want to clearly state it clearly states that no bid shall be rejected at bid opening ceremony. So at no bid opening ceremony, someone bids can be rejected. I have witnessed at different levels where people have disqualified bidders at the opening ceremony because they said they didn't submit that or they didn't submit this. That is not allowed under the laws of Guyana. You have to open, and it can be only disqualified at the bid evaluation phase. In terms of opening the tenders, the Procurement Act clearly states that bids should be opened in public at the time specified, or if there's an extension of time, at the specific place identified. And it clearly states, as Mr. Wickham said, all persons who submitted bids, you are welcome to witness the bid opening. Under the Act, it clearly states that the name address, bid number, and tender price shall be announced at the bid opening. To follow up that, what the National Procurement and Tender Administration has done is that we also mention the signed form of tender which has to be signed, the bid security in terms of the supply and the amount, and the certificate of compliances. Those are also read out at the bid opening, and records are made of those. Evaluation have to be done by a set of evaluators, and based on the Procurement Act, under Clause 17, it says that once bid is open, we have to identify 3 qualified and experienced individuals to work as the evaluation committee. And those are appointed from a pool of evaluators that are approved by the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board. So even though the region level, those persons that are evaluating bids for the region level are supplied by the Regional Tender Board, but have to be approved by the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board. Good. The Procurement Act clearly states that the evaluation committee shall only use the evaluation criteria outlined in the bidding document. And those for the sample document that Terence Narain uses clearly state the conditions. Once you have yes to all of those, then you'll be identified, and then we go to your price subsequent to that. But the law says all tenders should be evaluated and determine which tender has submitted the lowest evaluated tender. And again, the lowest evaluated tender does not mean the lowest bid at the read out bid price. During the bid evaluation, the evaluation committee may ask for a clarification of a certain bidding document. If there's certain information that the committee is not clear about, they have the power to ask that person to seek clarification. But it also says that they should have no change in the matter of substance in the tender, including changes in price, or unless it's an arithmetic error that's required to be computed. And there should be no changes aimed at making a non-responsive tender responsive. So they're just seeking clarification of certain information that they're not clear about. So if you did not submit your NIS or GRA, then they cannot ask you to submit, because that will be trying to make a non-responsive bid responsive. And this is what I talked about in terms of arithmetic correction. The laws of Guyana allows for arithmetic correction to be made to bidding document. And generally what it says, if you have a unit rate by a quantity and the total does not add up, say multiply, if you have 2 trucks, you pay $10 for a truck, supposed to be $20, but when you multiply 2 by 10, you have $40. What the evaluation committee done is use the rate as the basic and change the amount. We have a lot of contractors, some of them willfully do, some of them don't do, they use it as a strategy. So they put the right rate, the quantity is fixed, they use a wrong, they have the right rate, but in amount they doesn't put the correct value. So if the necessary cross multiplication is not made and you award the job to them, then they come back and say, but this here is incorrect. And it ends up carrying up the contract price. So it's a requirement of the evaluation committee to make sure that all arithmetic checks are done accordingly and the necessary changes are made. The Procurement Act also states that there should be no negotiation between the procuring entity and any bidders. And this is only for civil work. If you're procuring consultancy service, the Act under Chapter 52, I think, allows for a negotiation. But once we're talking civil works, works and goods, there should be no negotiation between the procuring entity and the bidders. And simply, this is the same set of criteria that was mentioned to you earlier. So what is saying that you need to say, have all of these things required. There are forms that are in the bidding document that have to be filled out. For example, you just go through them quickly. Registration, that's a given. Once your company is registered, you will have a certificate of registration. You have to make sure it's valid to submit it. Your compliance is your GRA, NIS. The completion of the form of bid. Again, this was mentioned this earlier. A lot of contractors complete the bidding document, submit it, but then the form of bid is not signed. Once you don't sign your form of bid, you're automatically disqualified. Again, we talk about financial statement, and this key word is audited financial statements. We have a lot of contractors that give figures, type up their own financial statement, but the key word here, it has to be audited financial statements. And there should be persons on the evaluation team that is capable of examining these financial statements. Line of credit was mentioned. This is a letter from either a supplier or a banker to say that you're doing business with them and this is the amount of money they're able to lend you for a specific job within a specific period of time. We have a lot of cases where people have line of credit letters, but those letters are outdated, sometimes 2 to 3 years. So you need to make sure that those letters are up to date. As Terry mentioned before, the meta statement, your past experience, bid security. Once the job is over 15 million, there's a form within the contract. And most of the insurance company, the banks know this form. You go and you tell them and they provide you with such a form. Authorization to seek information from your bank, that was mentioned before, power of attorney, litigation, price, bill of quantities, and in terms of equipment, you have to show that you have this equipment. Either if you lease it, you must ensure that your lease agreement is attached to the document, and your lease agreement cannot be outdated also, because sometimes I've seen places where people have lease agreements since 2012, and it may or may not be valid. Sometimes you call those people and they say the agreement they have is no longer valid. So you need to make sure that those documents are in order. And what Terry mentioned in terms of engineers, you need to make sure that your engineers, have the necessary experience in the specific areas. And Terry has also mentioned that now we put in a form where the engineer have to sign, because a lot of contractors are using engineer CV without their permission. So now the contractor, the supplier, when they submit the CVs of those persons, have to ensure that the engineer themselves say yes, they are aware that you're using their name for this job. And once you satisfy all of the non-financial criteria, then it goes strictly to cost. And again, this is based on your costs being corrected if there are arithmetic corrections. There are other areas where bidders can be disqualified. As Mr. Barry mentioned very early this morning, if you misrepresent information, you can be disqualified. If one of the suppliers tend to offer gifts, bribes to any other government person, you can be disqualified. If the lowest evaluated bidder failed to sign a contract or provide the necessary bonds that may be required, if he doesn't do so within the required time, he also can be disqualified, and then the job goes to the second lowest evaluated bidder. Now, these are things that I just want to mention, which are some common downfalls where contractors fail to secure bids, even though they might have the best price, but in terms of the non-financial, they don't have the necessary information. As mentioned this morning by Mr. Wickham, contractors fail to submit the required copies. Now, the reason why we're having this is like a check and balance. Now, contractors most times are asked to submit an original copy, an original and 2 or 3 copies. How the evaluation is done is that the original and sometimes one of the copies goes out to the evaluation committee. One of those copies are kept, if it's at the Ministerial Tender Board or National Tender Board, kept in a secure area. Now, we have had cases where I have seen where a contractor submit a document, and in his cover letter, he said work program is attached. When the evaluation report came back, it came back as saying the guy did not submit a work program. Now, it could have been that work program could have been, the bidding document could have been tampered with, or he accidentally forgot to put in the work program, even though his cover letter said that the work program was provided. What we attempt to do is to go to the original to see if, in fact, a work program was submitted, but the copy that was submitted was nothing close to the original document. The copy just only had the bill of quantities. So even if the contractor had submitted a work statement, it was tampered with, the copies that is secured don't reflect the same thing as the original. So it's very difficult for us to do checks and balances. So that is why we're asking you for your copies to be identical to your original for those kinds of checks. Now, there are many documents to be submitted. Some of the contractors take the time to make sure that the documents are submitted in a logical order. They have a cover letter to say, please see attached my NIS, my GRA, my certification, and everything, and it's properly documented. Some of the other contractors just stick them in haphazardly. Sometimes during the bid evaluation, during the bid opening, documents can be misplaced. So you need to make sure that your documents are properly secured, and you put it in such a way that it makes it easy for the evaluation team to go through your bidding document and find the necessary information they need. And it's simple. All you need to make sure is that you satisfy what is asked for in the bidding document. Some contractors have a host of equipment. We just want 3 pieces of equipment. Some contractor is going to supply pages and pages of equipment. Now you have to go through that to sift out to see exactly what you want. All you have to do is put, even though you can support the information, which is additional information, but we'll be only marking you on this few pieces of equipment we asked for. We talked about this morning is that some contractors submit expired documentation, sort of certification compliant, letter of credits, lease agreement. Many contractors, big contractors, fail to submit simple things like work program meta statement. Now, as Terence mentioned, we need to know exactly how you're going to go about do this work. Your work program is showing your schedule. You're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. But a meta statement goes a bit more, as Mr. Terence Narayan mentioned, your quality of control, your quality assurance, your procurement, those things come into your meta statement. I've seen a lot of people, a lot of bidders who have been disqualified because they failed to submit the letter to give us permission to call the bank or call the surety to see that you have liquid cash, as you may say you have. It's just a simple letter to say that I grant you permission to call the public bank. This is my information to confirm that what I'm saying here is true. Some of the contractors write the bank and copy to us. So when we call the bank, they make reference to the letter, and then they can say yes or no if what the information provided is true. Fine, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. Given how much this presentation flows into the next one, we're just going to ask, back by popular demand, Mr. Philip Bryan to do the last presentation, and then we'll take all the questions together based on these two. Philip, no pressure, but if you finish in 9 minutes, we would have been on schedule.
This final presentation is on contract award and protest. It was a little bit difficult to put this together because contract award I consider in project management to be an event and not a process. Contract award goes along with protest in this presentation because when a protest happens, it becomes a process. Hope I didn't lose most of my friends here because we have a little argument about this particular event. What I will do is just refresh your mind quickly with some of the things Mr. Wickham said this morning, so you will see how we arrive at contract award. So once again, there's type of solicitation, and this deals with not pre-qualification, but it goes beyond that. You have been invited, and so on. So type of solicitation or invitation for bid, there are 3 different types: sole sourcing, restrictive tender, competitive bidding, and this is public tendering. And it may be the National Competitive Bidding, NCB, or ICB, which is the International Competitive Bidding. The Procurement Act, right there in Part 4, Section 1 to 2, deals with public tendering. It says that public tendering is mandatory. Invitation to tender or the pre-qualification is mandatory, meaning that whenever the government intends to conduct business, what is mandatory is that they consider, first of all, the engagement of the public, open tender, and that this engagement must go by way of invitation, whether it is for the bid or for pre-qualification. Any other method of tendering must be based on grounds put forward with justification and circumstances which allow it to deviate from public bidding. Those situations that may allow a deviation from public bidding would be the sole sourcing and the restrictive bidding. Restrictive bidding is highly complex, or I should say the circumstances or the justification for restrictive bidding is when you have a highly complex or a specialized nature of intervention to be made, or when there's only limited available suppliers to provide this particular goods or works. Restrictive bidding generally is used when there's a very low risk to the ministry, and risk here is calculated by dollars when it's below our ministerial threshold limit. For sole sourcing, the justification and circumstances for this is a little more elaborate. As you would imagine, just selecting one person to do the job as opposed to restricted, and even for the open bid. For sole sourcing, the circumstances or justification for this would be when there's an availability of only one particular supplier. Let's say you want to move telephone cables, or you want to move some water mains. This is GT&T and GWI, or maybe if there's some special piece of equipment for dredging or for laying some cable, and there might only be one person in the country with the specific equipment for doing this, then you can do that. However, no reasonable alternative, or so, if no reasonable alternative exists, then you can go ahead with this. Mr. Wickham and I believe Ron mentioned we can go ahead with sole sourcing in the case of a catastrophic event. Catastrophic in the sense of sudden, and sometimes maybe the complexity and the size of the event. When many of you will be pre-qualified later on, if we have a small breach of the seawalls, or if a very small thing happens, it's catastrophic, it is sudden, and responding to its solution or responding with a solution does not usually allow us to engage multiple suppliers and so on. If it's happening at Karasabay, or if it's happening in Moblissa, and there's one contractor in Moblissa or its environs with the capacity to bring a solution, we can easily call that contractor through the process of single sourcing to provide a solution or an intervention given his location and so on. Sometimes for a standardization, we would go back to the particular provider for additional supplies. If we bought a bunch of Toyota vehicles and we are looking for some parts, it makes no sense to go to open bid or calling a set of restricted folks if we have a single person providing Toyota parts. It makes no sense further to try to utilize aftermarket or Nissan parts. So for standardization, many times we tend to do that. Standardization is usually justification for, let's say we have the laboratory and it has specific types of equipment that harmonizes with some other little parts. Because it is standardized way of operating, we can use this single source selection part. Mr. Wickham also mentioned the fact that the Guyana Defense Force, Guyana Police Force, for security reasons and so on, they tend to go to either restricted. They may have a very small bunch of providers who they would select to provide offers or bids. And again, if something happens in a remote location, if you have one guy at Lethem or Port Kaituma and something happens there and she is qualified to handle the task, then we invite. So these are some of the justifications for single sourcing. Public tendering has been discussed to nausea. Today, I wouldn't elaborate on that. So here is where I'm trying to go. The effectiveness of contract. This is just a term that really means when we engage in contract, when the contract is effected, when the contract is alive, when the contract is when you turn the engine on for the contract. When you submit a bid, if we say the bid closing date is the 10th of July, and your bid must remain valid for 90 days, we must engage you to say that the contract has been awarded, and we must effect the contract within that period. If not, we must request a bid validity extension. The bid validity extension is almost a negotiation. The only movement is for you to say yes or no. If you agree to the bid validity extension, then all the terms and conditions of your offer remains the same, such as the staff you propose, the price for it, the equipment, commitment, and so on, remains the same. And we are able to now effect that contract outside of its original bid validity period by asking for an extension, which must be requested in writing and your approval given in writing. Bid validity extension cannot continue ad nauseam or continue forever. The general rule about bid validity extension is if we call you in to build a road and the contract period was expected to be 2 months, it means that the life cycle of the contract or the project is the bid period plus 2 months. And there's an expectation that the value of the project or the value of your bid in this process anticipates the movement of money or the net present value to that period. Therefore, we cannot now be asking, well, we shouldn't be asking you to extend your bid validity repeatedly for the next 2 years. It makes no sense. So, as a general rule, what is used to determine the limit at which we can ask for bid validity extension or multiple bid validity extension is the understanding of the life cycle of the construction of the project, not the life cycle of the project and how it performs. Right. So, once we would have engaged the contract after whether or not extending the bid validity period, we move toward notification. So you have bid submission, bid was evaluated, the tender board, who's the official agency to award contracts, would have given their approval of that contract. Subject to cabinet's no objection where applicable. The next step or the next act is for the executing agency to issue to the winning bidder an acceptance of bid. At the same time, discharge to the competitive other bidders a notification of award. This act of issuing acceptance of bid and notification of award at the same time is the act that signals the commencement or opens the door or the opportunity for protest action. And this is so that we remain fair and transparent. This is the mechanism that allows for that. The Procurement Act, Part 7, deals with administrative review, and here is where you have the details of how protest action is entertained. who may protest? Applicants or bidders whose proposals were either rejected or were not selected as the winning bidder. That protest action must be made in writing to the procuring entity, stating, I'm protesting this award, I'm protesting this process because I believe X, Y, and Z, or my price was the lowest, and requesting for a review of the evaluation. It makes no sense to say, I vex with you. Yeah, okay. I mean, you got to say I vex with you because you got on a red shirt. You're supposed to be wearing a green shirt. And I think you should change your shirt. So once we understand what is the intent, and the reason for this, the Procurement Act allows us the freedom to entertain only protest actions that makes sense. You know, if somebody says, I protest the award of this contract because it was made during the rainy season. Okay, fine. We hear you, but, you know, thanks. But so when you protest, you need to say, I'm protesting because of this, and I'm requesting a review. When that is done, who did that? When that is done, we are able to move forward and set up the review board, review the evaluation, and so forth. So the protest must be submitted within 5 working days following the publication of contract award. The word publication of contract award might be misleading, but what it really speaks to is when we would have, at this stage, at the at the 5th and the 6th activity there, acceptance of bid and notification of award, those 2 things really speak to the publication of the award there, publication of the contract award. That is what it means. When we would have said to the winning bidder, acceptance of bid, at the same time discharge to the other bidders, a notification of award. That is what publication of contract award means. In a more elaborate sense, it means when we would have published it in the newspapers or in some media, because this is one of the responsibilities of, I think, the tender board, to publish all awarded contracts on their website and so on, or use a medium that, you know, they choose. The protest must be submitted to the procuring entity, not to the office of the president or to your favorite minister and so on. The permanent secretaries are the accounting officers for all of the ministries, and it must be addressed to them, and it must be addressed to the procuring entity. If you wish, you can have it carbon copied to whomever. But the minister or the office of the president or the opposition leader, they do not have the authority to react to protest actions. And again here, in the protest, the bidder must request a review of the process, a review of the evaluation. If not, then it is just, I vex with you. When the protest is entertained or received well, an evaluation committee is set up to review the first done evaluation, and it comprises at least 3 members, and those members are appointed by the minister of the procuring entity. A member is selected or proposed by the contractor, and one is proposed by the Attorney General. To conduct this review, the committee then makes its findings, and the committee is obligated to make those findings within just about 2 weeks. Damages incurred for this process is noted, and the final contract award, well, as a matter of fact, the whole process. Therefore, if we're saying that we are awarding this contract to Robin Chandra Paul Construction Services, then that is in suspension. We cannot move forward. We cannot issue him a commencement order to start the work. We cannot ask him to provide a bond. We cannot issue him mobilization and so on. It is frozen and suspended until the final readings from the review committee. The decision of the protest committee shall be final, swift, and immediate. The Procurement Act, at least in my readings, doesn't speak to a further appeal to this process or to this decision. I'm not aware if the bidder can go to litigation and all that. I'm not aware of that. From all my readings and my peer review on this matter, I'm not aware that in the bidding process you can go further than a review. I mentioned earlier, or I alluded to, what a protest is not. All right, so let me just back up on the first point. What is becoming culture in Guyana, at the same time we are trying to break, is while an evaluation is in process, and I don't do evaluations, and because there's a God, thank you. Evaluations, I mean, when an evaluation is being done, too often the porosity of the system causes contractors to become aware of who are the evaluators processing these documents. And too frequently, you would see or hear a contractor call and he's inquiring about something or making mention about the process or making mention that, I understand that this other bidder didn't submit these other things, or I understand that my document had a correction and I'm now the most responsive and so on. If I failed to advise this, I would have really missed my job here. The Procurement Act is clear. The Procurement Act is clear. If any of this is entertained, the contractor shall reveal who disclosed that. This can be taken to a point of jail time and charges. It's a very dangerous practice to be colluding and to be influencing the process. Evaluators are to remain secret. The job of the evaluators is one that it is done behind curtains on behalf of the national board. Contractors who believe that they're either helping the process or trying to assist the process to remain transparent are breaking the law. The time for protest is the moment of notification of award or acceptance of bid, not before. Therefore, filing a protest before the announcement of the award is, according to the game going to pack, is bunging the process. If you Is it wrong card game? Wrong card game. 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 It's Trump. No, you bong need the process. Yeah. Robin did say procurement is boring. I need to find something else. Right. So once you file a protest before, what you would have done is automatically disqualify yourself from a review or from a consideration. I don't want to say any more on protest action. I want to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Philip, and we'll go straight into questions on the last two presentations, if there are any.
My name is Randall Font. My question is from a consultancy point of view. Recently, we submitted an expression of interest, and we received a letter whereby we were not granted to go forward into the proposal stage because they said we did not submit a compliance. Nowhere in the document requested that.
All right, again, one of the objectives of this seminar is to educate and to equip. Is one. Well, actually, that's two. So, what the Procurement Act says, and what the rules outlined in the bidding document or the invitation for expression of interest would have said to you is that the evaluators are restrained by what the law says in order to arrive at their findings. So if you hear that you did not make the short list because you did not have or you didn't submit a compliance certificate, you are free, you are empowered to react to that process and to protest it, to say none was asked for. That is what should happen. Then you can protest. Then you can protest. Remember, the clock starts to count or tick from the time of the publication of the award. So when the award of contract is public or published, that is day one. And you have the right, or you're empowered, like I said, to then protest that and ask for a review.
The name is Anthony Haynes, professional civil engineer. This afternoon, I must say that I am glad to be here, but at the same time, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed because the morning started well. We had almost full house. And at this time, the count is low. I want to juxtapose this session to a school system. I would imagine that the people that we would have asked to be here today can be considered the nursery of the system. But much of what was presented seemed to be somewhere at the grade 6 level. And so much of what I believe was said was way beyond the nursery level. And I think, and I'm subjected to correction there, the reason why most persons left is because they believe that what they heard says to them that they can't get into the system. And I don't believe that was the objective of the exercise. I will advise that the ministry do some damage control and seek to have those prospective contractors. Probably I heard you said you want to have a session just before the next cycle of pre-qualification. We address issues pertaining to how the small contractors can get into the system. And I would also suggest that other agencies be invited, because I know for a fact that the Ministry of Public Infrastructure cannot employ all the people that were here this morning that need employment. So I would suggest that you incorporate other agencies to go, say to the small contractors how some of them can get into those areas. And I would suppose that should include the regions. Thank you.
Thank you.
This question is directed to Mr. Rahman. In Mr. Narayan's presentation, he said that single entity, individual, and incorporated companies should submit as financial statements, income and expenditure statements, balance sheet. For the incorporated, they should add a notes of audit. In your presentation, I note you mentioned something about submitting audited financial statements. What I want to know, is it for every single type of company?
For my, and I will need some guidance on this, for my indication, it has to be audited for every single kind of company, yes.
Company meaning small business, sole trader, partnership, whatever.
Yes,
it has to be audited.
Yes.
No.
Thank you.
No. If you're incorporated under the Companies Act of Guyana,
so it's only for incorporated companies, then you have to submit an audited financial statements.
Which is in addition, mostly. The audited financial statement is what we ask for companies, usually. But if we ask for the balance sheet, is in order for us to see stuff and so on. But I think the auditor makes a statement about the liquidity and the financial soundness of the company, and that is what the audited financial statement is about. It's a statement. It doesn't have figures and all of that, and we're able to use that registered, licensed auditor's statement to inform us about the soundness financially for the company.
But that is isolated to an incorporated company.
That is absolutely
Thank
correct.
you.
Special good afternoon once more concerning the protest, Mr. Bryan. Just one thing I want to get clear, because you want to know if when you protest, how far could you get? Concerning, I want to know what are the obligations or the commitment of the procurement entity towards the appointed committee of review. Because suppose I, as a contractor, appoint somebody, you got the contractor could appoint one, you say in your statement, right? If I appoint somebody, what is the obligation in requesting certain documents? Because if I'm representing a person, I might need to see certain things to query to that person to say, well, if they were fairly dealt with and so on. What are the obligations of the procurement entity towards the appointed committee to review that protest over the ward?
All right, so okay, fine. The three persons on the review committee are appointed by the minister, the contractor, and by the attorney general. They're using for that the purpose of the review the same documents which the first evaluation committee appointed by the national board would have used. Therefore, the access to documents and am I getting the question right? That is what they have to use. So it is a review. Yeah. I mean, if it's a review, right. You're welcome. Minister will now speak to.
Thank you. I just want to address the little matter. I stepped out, unfortunately, early on, and I heard Minister Sharma inform me some of the sentiments, and I heard what Mr. Haynes said. And I wanted to, for you here, communicate to your colleagues the intention of this seminar. I know everyone probably expected, or that some may have expected you walk out. You arrived at the seminar, and then there will be a handout of jobs and those things like that. The intention of this seminar is exactly what Mr. Haynes and everybody else feels it. I have already inquired from the financial secretary to reopen my ministry. This is my ministry to organize this. My pre-selection, pre-qualified contractors list, and I've already said for the last half of the year. Unfortunately, if you do not do the basics, what we're trying to advise you here, you still will not make that list. And the basics, the basics are, I thought you would have gotten this. Your basics are you have your NIS, your GRA compliance, an address, business registration. Those are the basics. If you say you have no equipment, we would not ask you to tender to build a barge. If you don't have any trucks, we wouldn't ask you to tender to build to truck anything. But the basic is you have to get on, because how would we know where to pull our new contractors from? And that is one of the things. And how will we know? Obviously we can't deal with individuals. We have over 500,000 persons here, with 300 and something them are eligible for employment. So we're trying to deal with, a company and a business registration, some form of formality. Those are the minimum levels in which we can, as a ministry, I'm speaking particularly, I know somebody will ask about some other ministries, but I'm thinking particularly about the Ministry of Public Infrastructure. And then so the process is, and as I explained this morning, but we didn't want to go into the part whereby when next we were opening, when next they got jobs, what jobs you have, and those things like that, unless you get yourselves in order. The processes, I'm sure, I don't know, we didn't go into it. There's a PS limit, which are projects under $1 million. That's the permanent secretary limit. That's all that is required for that is 3 quotations. But we can't get 3 quotations from people we don't know. You just putting your name down on our registration doesn't make you a contractor. And then when we give you a document to give us a price, you must be able to fill that in and send it back, have a house, an address where we have to send it to. So, Mr. Haynes, why you think it's a nursery school and those things like that? We were hoping that you have a basic understanding of what's going on, what we expect, and how we do. When they get to the ministerial, the ministry's tender limit, which is, as I explained, is $14 million, we can, and we have the option, depending on the work it is, to invite the people who are pre-qualified in the sections of work in which they're pre-qualified to do. And there's a whole variety of works. There's emergency works. In my ministry, I can only speak for my ministry, but I think it's probably general. There's emergency works of, fences down. You have 3 contractors, you have things. But if you don't do the basics, and that has been the problem, that's why we felt we should hold this. If you don't do the basics, if you don't try to put yourself in some standard, some level of order, you will always complain that you're not getting work, you'll always complain that you're being excluded. And inclusion doesn't mean because you have a desire to be a contractor means that you will be included. It's all, and that is what we're trying to do. Obviously, you will I want to give an example. Suppose you are included. Suppose you get to work 2 or 3 jobs. You're now qualified to move over from only the PS. You have to jump into the ministerial, which is the 14, which is the bigger players. If you don't know, if you don't have a session, like if you don't know what it is, even though you may not feel you'll ever be there, but I do hope that everybody aspires to be a large contractor, you will run into problems, unfortunately. And when you run into problems, unfortunately, the system is such that you're penalized very hard, extremely hard. I mean, debarred, it goes against your name. Because with anybody, you know that if you hire a contractor to build your house, contractor X, and he makes a mess of it, the word gets wrong, right? Everybody knows contractor S is a messy contractor. So no one wants to hire contractor X. And that's unfortunately how the public service works as well. So don't be daunted by the information you have. Don't be daunted by thinking. I mean, the young lady there is asking questions on financial statements and those things like that. They're all good. But in most cases, it's your company, unless you are representing a big company, you will not be in that league. I mean, apologies if I am being presumptuous if you're there already. But you will not be in that league. You'll be asked, I mean, I can tell you, well, Philip is here, I mean, you could ask that when we do small jobs, there's certain basic things we ask you about. Your experience. I mean, forget the NIS and those things like that. You know what I mean? Litigation, workmen, any credit. And to get credit is the simplest thing ever. You go to a contract. No, I'm telling you, to win a contract. There's 2 different things between to win a contract and to your negotiation with your creditor. You can go to any one of the stores and they will give you a letter saying, if Tom Jones is successful, I am willing to give him credit up to $100,000. And there's no obligation on the store, because if you're not successful, there's no thing. Pardon? Thank you, sir. No, so we put up hurdles because I know the system may seem overwhelming. The information that we are supplying may seem out of where you want to over your league. But it's all in the interest of trying to move this process forward. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, the very unfortunate issue is that we are not empowered by law to simply, there were 300 persons here, to simply say, 10 of you 300 come by me tomorrow and here's the work. It's a competitive process. And I do hope that you would take from today, put yourself in some semblance in order, and don't approach procurement as I wouldn't get the work, or that we're trying to excuse, we're only going through the motions, and give it a serious attempt. And hopefully, when we do our year-end review, we can see where the process has carried us. Thank you. I hope I addressed these issues for you.
Thank you very much, Minister. And while the rest of you are coming up with your final questions, let me just first, before we get to that, thank the staff of the Arthur Chung Convention Center for all the good work today. And what you may not have been seeing, but they've been busy behind the scenes, is a lot of the staff of the Ministry of Public Infrastructure who have been going beyond the call to make sure that everything runs smoothly today. So let me thank them. And the questions.
My question is to Mr. Rahman. As it relates to the evaluation criteria, I'm just seeking some clarity, especially to the technical aspect. I notice you had the yes, no heading. But as it relates to the technical criteria, I notice you had a list of equipment. That was the example given. Right? How do we address that? And also in terms of the experience of the engineers, those things, because I don't believe in yes, no is suitable.
Okay, first I just want to say that the evaluators can only use the criteria set out in the bidding document. Now, if that is what the bidding document has, then that is what the evaluation criteria has, the evaluators have to use. Now, in terms of the first question, you talk in terms of, what was the first one you asked? The second one had to do with human resources. The first one has to do with equipment.
Right,
Good.
equipment and also the technical criteria.
Good.
Under that section, you have both equipment and then you have the
human resources.
Right.
Good.
Engineers.
Now, based on the example used, it shows that you need several pieces of equipment. You either say if you have this equipment, if you have intention of lease them. If you don't have the equipment and if you don't have intention of lease, and then you would not be qualified. If you don't have them, and you have a letter from a supplier, someone saying that they have this equipment, and you or them have an agreement to lease the equipment, then you'll be compliant, then it will be a yes. So that is how that section works. Philip and Terence, if...
Yeah, I just wanted to...
That is how...
Yes. No, this is working. That's exactly what I mean, and the misconception, and Mr. Haynes would know. I mean, I'm picking him because I know he's a good friend of mine. But that's when you come to pre-qualify and they ask you for a roller or whatever the equipment is, just as Ron is saying, maybe it's not clear to you. You don't have to own the roller. That's what Ron is saying. You go to one of the suppliers, even a fellow contractor, who says a letter, listen to me, if Mr. Ron Maharman gets the job, I have a roller, me and him made an arrangement, I will loan, lease, whatever. If you're lucky, you could buy it from him. But and that qualifies you. You know what I mean? So don't be daunted by the paperwork. That's all we're trying to say. Maybe we should have tried to reinforce that, as we said. Don't be daunted by the criteria. You can make it.
I wasn't looking at the pre-qualification. I was looking at from the evaluator's standpoint, right? Going through the evaluation, how they would go about evaluating the process. Also, another quick question in relation to the document, the document. No blanks, we're informed no blanks should be there, but some persons will tend to put, let's say if they put 0, would that be treated as not completing?
You're talking about the bill of quantities?
Yes, the bill of quantities.
Yes, there's a clause that says the contractor should have rates towards each one of the item. If no rate is put there, it is deemed to be considered in another rate.
Right, so if they put 0, how do you treat that?
Yes, then the rate will be 0, and then if you do that specific item, you would not be paid for it. But I just want to come back to the same thing now. If you use a strategy like that, and the gentleman was saying that the lowest the person get a job, the job is $4 million, but then the contractor gets $2 million. What needs to be done is that if you go into the bid and you notice that some of the rates supplied by the contractors are not realistic, you can then ask the contractor to do a detailed breakdown to show exactly how it's able to do that item at the rate provided, and that we'll have to evaluate that, because many cases you have contractors, they put very high price for one item and very low price for the other one. You will need to justify that to the evaluation committee so they can understand exactly your thinking and how you're going to get the job done.
My name is Walt Glasgow. I am here today as Inward Investment Officer, Linen Enterprise Network. I think the session was very informative for the most part, and we would have left here today far more informed than we came. And for those who are worried not, or it seems as though we are getting somewhere. Now, I have a question for the Junior Minister of Finance. We are in the open session now, and I think that this particular point needs to be made. Government contractors are actually done on credit. Contractors or persons who consider themselves pre-qualified after you would have acquired all these stuff that they're asking you for have to spend your money and then wait on government. If you do private contractor, for the most part you're waiting, because the mobilization fee, you're always ahead, or else your contract won't be behind time. If you want to done the contract on time, you got to spend your money. And especially if you're going to the lower tiers of tenders. Now, I had an experience last year. Sometime in December, myself and some other colleagues were called upon to do some three-coat contracts. And wrong about the 15th, and then by the time we get ourselves together and get our own mobilization and so on, we run towards the end of the year. The day before Old Year's Day, or the 30th, we were called, gentlemen, y'all gotta come, get y'all end-user certificate signed, and bring them in Rasiana and get paid. Hurry up, get all the work done, bring in the end user. Old Year's Day, we had the regional office waiting. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, so by the day close off. When the year came to an end and the new week started, we understand that it gone on as unpaid account. Unpaid account. Every week until last month, you come into the region to get your money because you already pay the workers. It's your money, you know. You pay the workers, you pay the storeman or you hold the storeman or whoever you borrow the money from. And from January, February, March, April, May, June, all the region telling you they're waiting on the Ministry of Finance for approval. Now, what I can say to you, last year, November, I was in a good financial situation until I got that contract. Whatever the system is, IMPS or IM, whatever they have at the ministry, IFMAS, the system can't be bigger than the people. System close off 10 o'clock Old Year's night. That is what we were told. And until June of 2016, small contractors, three-coat contractors we're talking about, people who take the 600,000 or the 500,000 to do a 800,000 contract. Until June of this year, we got those monies. Now you think about how that situation can ruin someone and cause them not ever to want to do any more government contracts. Minister of Finance, there are some things that may not have come to your attention or some things that were used to break the backs of people in times past. Things like that we would like the ministry to look into. There must have some mechanism in place that somebody could have called the Minister of Finance and said, look, this is not big contractors like the BK them. These are small people. Can't we have them paid by January month end? Mr. Finance, can you please respond?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Your situation is not a situation that is uncommon. It's a situation that existed since government accounting existed. And basically, it's not a system which is affected by the IFMAS. It's a misconception. And basically, in financing, in government accounting, financing, you know the budget is for a year. And you know the Ministry of Finance have a department called the Accountant General Department. You know we have to process every single payment by the 31st of December because the finances for the budget lapse at the 31st of December. So that is where the problem lies. So the Accountant General will write to every single ministry and regions informing them that they have to close off the system by a certain date. That date is around the 15th of December. It means that no ministry or region is supposed to ask anybody to do any work. Every single account is supposed to come to be paid. As you rightfully said, you were called almost the last day of December, which complicated the situation. So basically, the books was closed. And the difficulty is now, when the books are closed, the law stipulates, as I mentioned, the budget lapsed at the 31st of December. The difficulty comes if the region or the ministry, I'm speaking in general because other people may have the same problem. If the region or the ministry didn't have money in their accounts in terms of the specific chart of account line item. Now, if that ministry gave you a job and say it was maintenance of building, which is 6242, maintenance of building. Maintenance of building money is depleted. It's zero. They can't pay you, even if they had put through the payment. There's no money in the system to pay you. Now it's classified unpaid accounts. Now, Ministry of Finance will be given that voucher in terms of the Office of the Budget. Office of the Budget will now look to see if Region 10 had money under that line item. If they didn't have no money, well, sorry, you would not get paid. It's an administrative issue. If the region had money, then the Ministry of Finance will say, after the budget is passed, they will approve such payment to be released. And that is why you probably get paid in June, because they had to wait until the money is released to the agency. And this is something which we have to deal with administratively, is that no accounting officer is authorized to enter no contract if there's insufficient money. And I hope that this answers your question.
I am fortunate to be here. When I saw the advertisement in the papers, I called up my bigger brother because he has been in the construction field since I was going to primary school. And today, I have started up a company and I have brought him into it because I went from as a simple welder going to starting up as a welder. I studied engineering. I studied general engineering because I love everything about anything that you can fix with your hands. And this opportunity here gives me, as a small, new contractor now coming into the system, an opportunity to address some of the questions that I had personally. Because from every slide to every listening to the minister, listening to every speaker from the procurement office to the finance minister, I think the finance minister would have addressed some of the issues that I would have wanted to raise in the future, because I now understand the system when he said what actually happened because of my friend, because I think I have some friends in Borbies that are facing the same situation, right? I could remember some of them had to wait at least 6-7 months before they got paid for contracts, and I think one of them presently is waiting from since last year. He did some work and he's still waiting for his money. So it's a very embarrassing situation. I think that is the system needs to address some of these issues, because it would be a concern in the future for the new time contractors too as well, because we need to look at these issues, because once you invest, means that we are entrepreneurs, and once you invest your finances, there should be some level of returns for your satisfaction. One of the things that I really wanted to say, at least I think it was 3 weeks ago, I came to an entrepreneurship workshop in the same compound where we were taught about an incubator system. And the incubator system means that for all the first-time contractors now, the Ministry of Public Infrastructure can use us as like an egg, and you nurture us until we become like the chickens, right? And there were some technical things that I really learned from that workshop, because that workshop has empowered me a lot to learn how you can actually develop your business. Because it does not mean that you must only come to the workshop, but it means that you would also have to maybe have to qualify yourself to develop some entrepreneurial skills and all of these things so that you can manage your business properly. So for me, I want to thank the ministry, and I would look forward for the workshop that I earlier talked about.
So I still have 2 questions to clarify with Mr. McKenzie. So I hope that he will still have a chance to speak. I want to know why many times that when tenders put out, if your GRE will be up, said a date, why the tenders is always put out a day before or 2 days before? GRE will help, say, maybe, I'm just saying something, this month, the 30th or the 31st, and the 1st, you have to get a GRE for tender, to show the tender box. I'm saying that maybe somebody is not conscious, or somebody want to disqualify somebody. So I would like, somebody to respond to that. And also I want to take this, to still go ahead with the question with Mr. Mackenzie. This is the right name? With NAIS. Yeah, the same. Oh, Boston. Sorry. So, yes, okay. So, don't forget the one with the tender document, okay, with the tender with GRE, and Mr. Boston with the NIS. As I was saying, that suppose, like I see Minister of Agriculture have some pump station out, and so they require the two compliance together. But when somebody is not working, and you go there, they will tell you you have to pay before you really get the compliance. And also, because the same reason why I raised this is because of the issue of had a problem with the holiday that passed there. And my compliance was up then. And the next day, the tender was opening. So when you go there, they tell you they cannot give you a NIS compliance in the name because it didn't expire. And that caused you to lose a lot of money or disqualify you. So I want to know that when I go there, when this address, what can I tell them or what can they give me? If it's a letter or something. And the last question, if you really, that if you're working, you must pay your tax, and I believe every contractor should pay the tax. But if a NIS officer saw you by your aunt nailing something, you're helping, you're not working. Just leave the mic over here. And when you go there, they tell you, you can't get compliant because I see you walking. How we will address this situation? Thank you.
For the GRA compliance, we normally advise persons, even though you might have a valid compliance and the due date of the next period is coming to board, we advise persons that you can apply before for that compliance. Your application will be lying there. We would process it. We would advise you of your outstanding taxes, if you have to submit your business registration and so on. We will have it there waiting until that expiration period has lapsed. And then on the 1st of July, let's say that's recently gone, we would process those compliance. You mentioned the connecting dates with the GRA compliance and the tender board when they advertise their tender. I know that the tender board is aware of the validity date of compliances and when they would issue a tender, and they would give some consideration when these dates clashes, because it's impossible for GRA to print 400 compliances for both company. We're not speaking about individuals alone, we're speaking about individuals and company at one time before 9 o'clock of the particular morning. It's impossible. So I know that the tender board would grant some consideration, but I still advise you to apply before the expiration date lapse for the compliance that you might have currently.
Well, I'm happy that the ministry provided chocolate cake for snacks this afternoon. Because I was out of energy. And I thought I was done. Anyhow. Okay, there are a couple of things, but one of them I'm going to mention, but I don't want to open it here because, in honest, it could be a Pandora box. But Mr. Rahman, I would recall that I did meet with the National Tender Board because there are some anomalies that we're spotting also that we perhaps need to work on to appease contractors, particularly with that one-day frame and so forth. But I find myself apologizing again. And like I said, you know, last night I was writing on effective feedback, and this forum has definitely provided that. Because sometimes you conceive that everything is going well in one of what I would call your virtual offices. Because apart from breakdown, we're spread. I'm not aware that NIS has the jurisdiction to deny a compliance because somebody had one that is not expired. So I'm going to look into that immediately. All right? I'm going to look into that. The issue, again, with inactivity period is a fairly simple one. And I'm going to undertake publicly today to also reiterate this to all offices. The onus is on you, the contractor, to inform of the inactivity period, and that should be enough to have us react positively to you as it relates to compliance. So I am going to put that as a circulating document, right, in writing. So I'm sorry on two counts. One of the contentious things that I found with the compliance certificate is that the certificate, we refer to the certificate as a valid document based upon the date of issue in a month's time. So one of the questions that I had engaged the tender board on is, when we ask someone for a valid compliance, what are we checking on? What do we really want to achieve through it? And that's the gray area that I won't elaborate on today. But it might just create a window of opportunity to erase that problem you spoke about. In addition to my conforming to all offices that they should not deny your compliance because you already have a valid compliance. I'll undertake to have those things rectified. If there was a cost, I mean, I don't think we have anything in the books like the Ministry of Finance to surcharge for such things, but I would want to apologize if we did cause you an inconvenience on that note. But I will have it rectified. There is no parameter that should be used to deny you a compliance. If you have a valid compliance, but a couple of weeks down the line you have applied for one, there's no provision that gives us the right to say you can't have another compliance. I look into that immediately.
Mr. Hamilton here again from Hamilton's Electrical. This is addressed to Mr. Boston. I have your name right? And also GRE. Very briefly, Mr. Musa, I'll give you a scenario. You have, and bear with me, you have a young child. He was living with one parent, and the parent spoiled that child. Now he's living with a parent that is a disciplinarian. He has to follow rules. And so it's a bit confusing for that child to follow that rules. Now, why I mention that, I'm going to go as far to say that the previous administration, they did not enforce, even though these were rules that have always been there, it was never enforced. And many of us as contractors, we went with that because that was the system of the system of the day. And so we went along with that. And now we have, I wouldn't want to say brand spanking new government, but a government is relatively young, and now they're dealing with children who have been spoiled and who have been led astray. And now we have to reform to the rules that we were not conducive to previously. Now, I believe, as I think the gentleman mentioned, in paying taxes. We're civil-minded people. We know that our taxes is needed to build infrastructure and do various things about. The government needs money to manage this country. We can't even manage our own households with money, so we can't expect the government to manage without money. NIS is very beneficial. It's a long, tedious process. We don't always get the best out of what we want, but this is a system we have. We should work with it. Now I'm asking both NIS and GRA, for us, the spoiled children who've been led astray for all these times, now we're in a system where we have to comply. What process is there? Let's say, for instance, persons owe NIS, GRA money. Are you willing to work, or what process is there to help that delinquent person to gradually pay off whatever money it has and to get this compliant so we can move forward and develop in this country? Thank you.
All right, I'll probably take that for us because I know for sure we're modeling after GRA. We haven't announced it publicly yet because it's not really fully structured. But we are moving towards a pronounced debt management unit. But even without that in place, let me advise that in the event where you're in trouble with your contributions, you come in. And fortunately, for now, I'm the person you speak to. You come in and we work with you. It's not hard and fast. It's more or less, it would lead to an agreement through negotiations, right? We look at the parameters, we look at what you have. But let me just say this as a backdrop to that. Whatever we agree to must be upheld by you. We won't force you, but whatever we agree to must be upheld by you, else that would give you a problem. Once you're keeping it, as we agreed upon, you'll get a compliance. That's a guarantee. Let me have GRA.
GRA has provisions in place where we look at persons who have outstanding taxes, as I would have mentioned in my presentation. If you have outstanding taxes and you can't afford to pay them all at one time, you submit a proposal to us, to the department, which we call the Debt Management Department. You submit a proposal advising us, okay, you have X amount of taxes and you can only pay $10 now and you want to pay the other $5 in $1 a month or whatever you propose. And we look at your proposal, we call you in and discuss with you, and we have an agreement in place. And so long as my colleagues say you continue to fulfill your obligation, we can work ahead and you can be granted a compliance.
Yes, this question was a build-up from Mr. Wickham. Part that he played this morning. We were speaking about capacity building and feedbacks and so on. Well, we're getting feedbacks now and things that they could work with. But you were speaking, I think, not only Mr. Wickham, but Mr. Patterson spoke upon the process and payment process in the ministry, and whereby you can't call and say, well, you need some money now. But in every contract that's being signed between the entity and the contractors, there's an agreement that say within so much weeks or so much days of the evaluation being taken, you're supposed to be paid. And if the ministry is asking us to compromise beyond that date, the ministry is expected to compromise contractor beyond the agreement of the schedule, because both ways, put your foot in my shoe, put on my shoe. Because in spite of a contractor saying you're supposed to have so much resources available to you to complete a job when you ask for the job or you tender for a job, it's still an agreement. We see it on receiving an evaluation, you evaluate the work, you went, you measure the work, so on, and you write up. Within 2 weeks is the maximum. Most regional contracts told you that. You're supposed to be paid. Sometimes you'll be 2 months. And they'll tell you there's no payment under this heading or line, whatever it be. And I think the system is running wrong. If under, let me say, education, there's a release of payment. And I'm dealing with the ministry alone because I mean it could feed back to the other ministry because Mr. Sharma is here and so on. Yeah. If there is under education, there's so much money released and they realize that that money is almost used. There's just a little remaining and you have contracts out there in millions. Why wait for persons ask or claim payment then to try to access some kind of money? Or why would you keep 500,000 in a system and know you have millions of dollars out there in work going on with contractors? My advice always be, if we got 500 remaining and we have millions out there in, make out some payment to some contractor that is progressing well, hold the check, and the account is empty, so more money will be released under that heading. You'll have a release under that heading, so when the contractor applies for money now, it's just for the balance to go with that check, right? Contractor should not be waiting months to receive a payment because if he's beyond schedule, he's get a whipping. He's not timely, he's not efficient, and so on. We have to look at it both ways, right? He might not have one contract. See, depending upon payments to keep all these contracts going, right? Because he disburses money and split it up between these contracts. And I think the ministry should, or overall, in the regional system and so on, that's why I said Mr. Sharma, glad for him to hear this, should pay some mind and take some account of this is going on. 2, we ask contractors for track record of work completed and so on. There's a great thing going on whereby only a few entities did it. When you finish a contract, you're supposed to be issued with a completion certificate. On the completion, every contract, you're supposed to issue with a completion certificate. So if you ask me for records, I could photocopy them, and that is evidence that I've completed the job. But most places now, most entities don't give you a completion certificate. I received from SEMCO already when we used to do work with SEMCO, and from ministry, I could compliment that entity, but it's no longer exists. It's dissolved because the money finished, the program finished. Ministry of Education Fast Track Initiative under Mr. Monroe, Devon Monroe. I could compliment him. Payments at the end of a job, completion certificate, right? So you have that as evidence to show that this I've successfully completed this job at this amount of money and so on. Not that I write and then you got to call somebody to find out if it's true and the evidence is there. So we should practice that at the completion of every job, issue the contractor with a completion certificate. Thank you very much.
Well, with that, we've come to the close of today's session, and let me thank Ministers Patterson and Ferguson for spending the entire day here. Also, Minister Sharma, who just left. It's an incredible undertaking, and you can see from the several times they've had to take a few calls that they're extremely busy and have forsaken something else important to be here. So we thank them very much for that. In closing, I would like to employ some advice that has served me well throughout life, and that is always to give the last word to a lady. So with that, I'd like to invite Minister Ferguson to close us off.
Thank you very much, Rabindranath. Once again, participants, a pleasant evening to you. You know, many of you, this morning, we started out with a packed auditorium, actually. And I guess folks, they had their own assignments to get done. But for you to stay on, to hear exactly what the presenters had to say, it had to be that, well, look, you're interested in this whole process that the Ministry of Public Infrastructure would have put on. Like you, and Rabindranath rightfully said, we have other things to get done. But I find this session to be one of informative because even though I'm in the system, I don't know everything. So staying on here during the course of today, I have learned so much. I got a full understanding of what the whole pre-qualification process is all about, what the procurement is all about, what our Procurement Act, 8 of 2003 now, speaks about, amongst other things. So I have learned a lot. So now that I'm educated or I'm informed, I can speak from an informed position. I know many of you possibly question in your mind, this kind of session is not what I anticipated. I know we had presentations, voluminous presentation, but the key to this symposium was basically to sensitize you, the new contractors that really have an interest in doing government biddings. And I just want to piggyback on what Minister Patterson alluded to earlier, and just before he came back here, I too would have made the very point that this session is basically to help you, to let you know what is expected of you. If you want to get into the system, you must start the process. You heard what is the process. If it's a company, you get your company registered. Then you go to NIS, you go to GRA, and you do the likewise. Then you can now bid for government contracts. So even if you start, as one presenter said, or I think it came from one of the participants, little bit, Dottie, there's been a big dam. So what we have to do, what you have to do, is start small, and gradually you're going to get like the BKs, you're going to get like the Knots, you're going to get like the Basus, you're going to get like the Allens, and I can go on and on. But the onus is upon you to get yourselves in order, and then you can start the process. Start from the prequel, and then you branch off big. Philip said earlier that, we may have another session, that's the pre-submission session, before you actually submit your final documents. So we will guide you through that process, so to ensure that you would have completed each and every piece of information and paper accurately before you make your final submissions. So with these few words in parting, let me take the opportunity in saying thank you for being good participants, and we do look forward to you going out there, educate your fellow contractors, and we do look forward to you attending more of our sessions. And may God richly bless you all. Thank you very much.